Chapter 2303. But at this point, Fan Jinsua wouldn't hesitate anymore. Lad, your life is now in my hands. Don't even think about trying anything funny. This lightning flash is something that can even kill a high immortal expert. No matter how strong you are, you won't be able to escape from it. If you want to live today, you have to agree to one of our conditions. If you agree, I can consider sparing your life. Fan Jinsua stared at Chu Fengmian and said coldly. Spare my life? Chu Fengmian was a little surprised when he heard this. Then, a smile appeared on his face. Tell me. His attitude was relaxed. It didn't seem like he was being controlled at all. This made many experts of the Tianjian sect feel indignant. It was fine if Chu Fengmian was arrogant outside. But now, Chu Fengmian had fallen into the array. His life was in danger, but he was still so arrogant. Boy, you're about to die, and you still dare to be arrogant? Your life is in our hands now. If you don't want to die, you'd better listen to us. Do you understand? An elder of the Tianjian sect couldn't help but say. How dare an old man who's about to die speak? Just as the elder of the Tianjian sect spoke, Chu Fengmian suddenly moved. A dragon claw condensed above his head and struck out. There was a boom. The elder of the Tianjian sect was killed on the spot. The elder of the Tianjian sect was only an immortal marquis. If Chu Fengmian hadn't received the inheritance of the Shansword sect, an immortal marquis would be considered a figure. But for the current Chu Fengmian, an immortal marquis was like an ant. It would be easy for him to kill him. Elder Wei. Several experts of the Tianjian sect saw Chu Fengmian attack. They wanted to stop him, but it was too late. Before they could do anything, Elder Wei was blasted into pieces by Chu Fengmian. Not even a drop of essence blood was left behind. After Elder Wei was killed by Chu Fengmian, all of his essence blood was devoured by the sky-devouring secret technique. Not even his bones were left. He didn't even have a chance to be reborn. Boy, what's the meaning of this? Do you want to die? That Fan Jinsua's expression turned extremely gloomy. He had trapped Chu Fengmian in his spirit formation and was planning to threaten him. Yet now, Chu Fengmian was actually killing people in the formation. He simply did not place him in his eyes at all. An old fellow who is about to die dares to point fingers at me. If he's dead, then he's dead. Fan Jinsua, didn't you say that you have a condition? Tell me, what are your conditions? To Chu Fengmian, killing Elder Wei was nothing more than a trivial matter. When Chu Fengmian was still young and weak, it was fine if someone ridiculed him. But now that Chu Fengmian had grown up, whoever dared to ridicule him was courting death. Humph! This attitude was extremely arrogant. A few of the Tianjian sect martial artists who were on good terms with Elder Wei were now glaring at Chu Fengmian. They wanted nothing more than to kill him. However, despite the intense killing intent, no one dared to speak. Chu Fengmian's personality was extremely arrogant. No one wanted to fall just because of a few words. Fan Jinsua also looked at Chu Fengmian for a long time before he slowly opened his mouth. I can spare your life, but you must pay the price for attacking the Tianjian sect today and killing the Tianjian sect's experts. From today onwards, you must serve the Tianjian sect for 30,000 years. Moreover, you must hand over all the opportunities you've obtained and hand them over to the Tianjian sect. After 30,000 years, I can set you free. Fan Jinsua said coldly. This is the only condition. If you agree to it, you can still live today. Otherwise, you'll definitely die here today. Serve the Tianjian sect for 30,000 years and hand over all the opportunities you've obtained? Many people were shocked when they heard Fan Jinsua's condition. This condition was really ruthless. They also knew that the Tianjian sect was willing to spare Chu Fengmian's life this time because they must have put forward an extremely harsh condition. However, this condition was almost the limit. Serve for 30,000 years. The lifespan of a celestial king warrior was only about 50,000 years. Serve for 30,000 years. Almost half of Chu Fengmian's life would be spent in the Tianjian sect. Moreover, if a warrior's lifespan was more than half, it would be devoured. It would be very difficult to break through to the next realm. Once the momentum had passed, it would be extremely difficult to break through to the next realm. Just like the Scorching Sun Sword Emperor, who had been in seclusion for tens of thousands of years, he still hadn't broken through to the immortal monarch realm. If Chu Fengmian served the Tianjian sect for 30,000 years, his strength would be equivalent to Chu Fengmian's, and he would stop there. In addition, he would have to hand over all the opportunities he had obtained. Everyone knew that Chu Fengmian had many opportunities. Whether it was the inheritance of the Shang Sword sect or the Sword Dao sect, no matter which force obtained it, it would make that force grow into a colossus. Chu Fengmian could obtain the service of a peak celestial king. In addition, Chu Fengmian had countless opportunities. If Fan Jiansuo agreed, then the Tianjian sect's losses today would be nothing. In fact, the Tianjian sect's strength in the future would be even stronger than it was today. Will Chu Fengmian accept this condition? What a harsh condition. Some warriors couldn't help but murmur to themselves. But if he doesn't accept it, only death awaits him. Some warriors couldn't help but say as they looked at the thunder beside Chu Fengmian. The Tianjian sect dared to make such a condition because they were threatening Chu Fengmian's life. If Chu Fengmian didn't want to die, he could only agree to this condition. Everyone looked at Chu Fengmian, waiting for his reply. This is your condition? Chu Fengmian's expression didn't change at all when he heard this condition. This made everyone a little confused about what Chu Fengmian was thinking. If you don't agree, only death awaits you. My patience is limited. Fan Jiansuo sneered as he looked at Chu Fengmian's attitude. Don't count on Alcade Star Emperor and the ancient White Wolf to save you. The moment they attack the formation, I will detonate the thunder. At that time, you will die without a doubt. Save me? Chu Fengmian's lips suddenly curled into a strange smile. Fan Jiansuo, have you lived too long? Is your brain damaged? Do you think you can threaten me with this thunder? Forget it. I've wasted a lot of time. I don't need to waste my breath on you. You want to threaten me with this little thunder? Break for me. The moment Chu Fengmian spoke, his body suddenly moved. His sword flashed, and he suddenly slashed at the surrounding warriors of the Tianjian sect. Puff! A total of 7 to 8 elders of the Sky Sword sect were killed by this single sword strike. Little bastard, you! Fan Jiansuo didn't expect that Chu Fengmian would ignore the threat of the thunder at this time and suddenly attack. His face was a little fierce as he shouted angrily. Attack! Chapter 2304. In an instant, Fan Jiansuo let out a long roar in the flying immortal peaceful heaven array. Suddenly, the surrounding thunderbolts were activated and exploded. Rolling thunderbolts roared toward Chu Fengmian. The power of these thunderbolts was enough to blast a peak stage immortal king expert to death. Each thunderbolt contained the power to destroy everything. The thunder of destruction. It's the thunder of judgment. This array can mobilize the power of heaven and earth and condense the thunder of destruction. Many martial artists and demon gods were shocked when they saw the thunder of destruction contained in the thunderbolts. This was the thunder of heavenly tribulation. The experts present had barely escaped death under the thunder of heavenly tribulation. The moment they saw the thunder of destruction, many people's hearts were filled with fear. Boy, since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Fan Jiansuo looked at Chu Fengmian with an incomparably malevolent expression. Originally, he wanted to threaten Chu Fengmian and make him work for the Heavenly Sword sect. However, since his threat had failed, he wouldn't leave Chu Fengmian alive. Judgment. Boom! In the center of the endless thunder of destruction, a figure slowly appeared. This figure was condensed by the thunder of destruction, as if it was the embodiment of heaven and earth that judged everything. When this figure condensed and looked at Chu Fengmian felt the rolling power of destruction descending. The power of heaven and earth was the most domineering power in the world. It had the power to destroy everything. Many immortal emperors and sovereigns had died under the power of heaven and earth. Be careful. The moment this figure condensed, Alcade Star Emperor, who was outside the array, could not help but exclaim. Even she felt that this figure condensed by the thunder of destruction was extremely difficult to deal with. It's okay. This little thunder of destruction is more like an appetizer for me. However, Chu Fengmian's face was incomparably relaxed as he spoke casually. The moment he looked at the figure condensed by the thunder of destruction, there was no fear in his eyes. Instead, he looked at it as if he was looking at a supreme treasure. This kind of expression shocked everyone. They couldn't understand why Chu Fengmian could still show such a relaxed expression in the face of such a terrifying existence. While everyone was still in shock, Chu Fengmian's body moved. His body was as fast as lightning as he suddenly soared into the sky. His target was the human figure that was condensed from the thunder of destruction. He suddenly stretched out his hand to grab it. Bare hands? He wants to deal with the thunder of destruction with his bare hands? This is courting death. Anyone who saw such a scene would feel incomparably crazy. This was the thunder of destruction. Even an immortal weapon would not be able to withstand the sharpness of the thunder of destruction. Even the strongest martial artists would die under this thunder of destruction. Chu Fengmian actually wanted to deal with the thunder of destruction with his bare hands. He didn't even use his strongest sword technique. What is he trying to do? Fan Jiansuo, who had poured all his energy into the lightning flash, was also staring in Chu Fengmian's direction. He was momentarily unable to understand Chu Fengmian's actions. He had a bad feeling in his heart. He's just deliberately mystifying himself. A peak immortal king expert of the Tianjian sect stared in Chu Fengmian's direction and snorted coldly. How dare he resist the thunder of destruction with his bare hands? In an instant, he will undoubtedly be killed on the spot. Rumble. However, the moment his voice died away, Chu Fengmian had already grabbed the thunder of destruction with his bare hands. However, the scene of Chu Fengmian being killed on the spot did not appear. Instead, Chu Fengmian's arm actually penetrated through the layers of tribulation lightning and directly pierced into the center of the human figure condensed by the thunder of destruction. The thunderbolts bombarded Chu Fengmian's body, but they couldn't break through his defense. What's going on? Resisting the thunder of destruction with his body? In the flying immortal peaceful heaven formation, the experts of the Tianjian sect were all stunned. This was a scene that they would never have imagined. A warrior using his physical body to resist the thunder of destruction? Even demonic beasts, or even wild beasts that dominated with their bodies, could not do this. I don't believe that his body can be so strong. Fan Jiansuo roared angrily and spat out a large mouthful of essence blood from his mouth. The essence blood that he spat out was immediately sucked into the flying immortal peaceful heaven formation and turned into incomparably pure immortal power that was injected into the thunderbolts. With the injection of essence blood from Fan Jiansuo, the human figure of the thunder of destruction started to swell crazily. Not only Fan Jiansuo, but the other experts of the Tianjian sect also used all their trump cards. They didn't hesitate to use their essence blood to activate their secret techniques to increase the power of the thunder of destruction. They also knew that today was the best opportunity to kill Chu Fengmian. This time, they had lured Chu Fengmian into the flying immortal peaceful heaven formation in exchange for this opportunity. If Chu Fengmian escaped into the formation, they would have no other means to deal with him. Countless experts of the Tianjian sect burned their essence blood and poured a large amount of power into the flying immortal peaceful heaven formation. The human figure of the thunder of destruction started to swell crazily. The size of the human figure was no different from that of an ordinary person. However, with the injection of essence blood, its body continued to swell. It was already a giant of 5 to 6 meters tall. The thunderbolts on its body also became more profound and closer to the level of the real thunder of destruction. The power contained within them was frightening. If the power of the thunder of destruction were to erupt completely, the entire central region would be flattened in an instant. Even the many hidden small worlds in the void would be directly blown apart by this explosion. Even a small world would find it difficult to resist the power of the thunder of destruction. Can this power really be resisted by human strength? Some warriors couldn't help but ask when they felt the terrifying power of the thunder of destruction. The power of the thunder of destruction had accumulated to the extreme and was about to descend on Chu Fengmian. The human figure of the thunder of destruction immediately gathered power in its palm and transformed into a thunderbolt spear. The thunderbolt spear descended with a loud boom. Its destructive power turned the surrounding space into nothingness. Good move. Chu Fengmian wasn't afraid when he saw the thunderbolt spear descending. Instead, he smiled and caught it with his bare hands. Rumble. The descending thunder of destruction landed in Chu Fengmian's palm. The ultimate destructive power washed over Chu Fengmian's body. Chapter 2305. As the destructive lightning washed over Chu Fengmian's body. On Chu Fengmian's body, 129,600 immoral crystals were tightly condensed together, resisting the impact of the lightning. Under the scouring of the lightning, the 129,600 immoral crystals on Chu Fengmian's body became denser. On every immoral crystal, the mysterious words became clearer and clearer. Is he using the tribulation lightning to refine his body? Seeing this, some demon immortals couldn't help but exclaim. Tribulation lightning to refine his body. This was also a method of refining the body. It was said that in the ancient times, some powerful demon beasts and desolate beasts would seek the tribulation lightning of heaven and earth to refine their bodies. The tribulation lightning was an extremely domineering power. It could be used to refine the body. This was the only way to achieve great success in refining the body. Those who could refine their bodies with the tribulation lightning mostly relied on the tribulation lightning of heaven and earth. However, Chu Fengmian was enduring the tribulation lightning of destruction. The tribulation lightning contained the power to destroy everything. This kind of power could destroy life. It could even cause a warrior's lifespan to wither and die on the spot. Using the tribulation lightning to refine his body? Is he crazy? No matter how strong his body is, it can't withstand the tribulation lightning of destruction. Another cultivator asked in disbelief. The tribulation lightning was easy to withstand. However, the tribulation lightning was truly terrifying. The destructive power contained in it could directly destroy life. It was unstoppable. Therefore, when everyone faced the tribulation lightning of destruction, they were extremely cautious and didn't dare to touch it. Now, Chu Fengmian was using the tribulation lightning to refine his body. This was an extremely crazy act. Even if Chu Fengmian's body was strong enough to withstand the lightning, the tribulation lightning of destruction wasn't something his body could withstand. Just as everyone was discussing, the 129,600 immortal crystals on Chu Fengmian's body began to decay as the tribulation lightning of destruction washed over him. This was the effect of the tribulation lightning of destruction. Everything in the world couldn't escape destruction. Even the immoral true body couldn't withstand it. He's too arrogant. Even an immoral emperor would die if he withstood so much tribulation lightning of destruction. An old man slowly said. Once the destructive force invaded one's body, it was almost impossible to resolve it. They were able to withstand the heavenly tribulation before the power of destruction invaded their bodies. Once the power of destruction invaded their bodies, no matter how strong they were, they would be helpless against it. Now that Chu Fengmian had withstood so many thunderbolts of destruction, the power of destruction had already invaded his body. There was no chance for him to dispel it. Brat, you're courting death by taking on the thunder of destruction head-on. Fan Jiansuo looked at Chu Fengmian and spoke with a ferocious expression. His face was incomparably pale and weak. In order to activate the thunder of destruction, he had burned a large amount of his essence blood. To him, this was a great loss. His strength had dropped by at least 30%. Even if he could recover his strength with the help of various miraculous items in the future, he would lose the possibility of improving his strength in the future. His cultivation level could only stay at the immortal king realm for the rest of his life. This kind of injury was simply destructive to a cultivator. But today, as long as he could kill Chu Fengmian, it was worth it to pay such a huge price. Chu Fengmian's various opportunities were terrifying. The more powerful Chu Fengmian's strength was, the more heaven-defying opportunities he had. Only then could a martial artist who was half a step into the celestial realm possess such terrifying strength. After obtaining the various opportunities from Chu Fengmian, even if Fan Jiansuo's cultivation level could not improve further in the future, his strength would be far greater than now. Die! Fan Jiansuo stared at Chu Fengmian with a ferocious expression. Under countless gazes, the 129,600 immortal crystals in Chu Fengmian's body became more and more decayed, as if they would shatter at any time. The power of destruction had already invaded Chu Fengmian's internal organs and spiritual veins. Even an immortal would not be able to save him from such a state. This brat is finished. Some cultivators shook their heads directly. In their hearts, they had already sentenced Chu Fengmian to death. What a pity! If this person grows up, he may become the strongest expert in the 9 regions. Unfortunately, he is still too arrogant. Some cultivators sighed. With Chu Fengmian's aptitude, the strength he would grow up to was unimaginable. Unfortunately, Chu Fengmian was going to die today. Even Alcade Star Emperor and the ancient White Wolf showed a bit of anxiety when they saw the changes in Chu Fengmian's body. Just when Alcade Star Emperor couldn't bear it anymore and was about to help. Suddenly, a blue light shot out from Chu Fengmian's body and soared into the sky. This light went straight to the 9 heavens, containing the supreme sword power. What is this? Some cultivators could not help but look over. Sword. The center of this light is a spiritual sword. This is sword origin. This is his natal sword origin. Some sword cultivators recognized the origin of this light. It was natal sword origin. For any sword cultivator, natal sword origin was not unfamiliar. It was something that must be condensed to become a sword cultivator expert. Is he going to use natal sword origin to resist the power of destruction? The power of destruction is the power of heavenly tribulation, the power of heavenly punishment. His natal sword origin is going to resist the power of destruction. He is simply overestimating himself. Many Tianjian sect experts in the flying immortal peaceful heaven formation said disdainfully. The power of destruction had invaded his body. No matter how strong the power was, it could not be dissolved. Today, no one could save Chu Fengmian. However, just as the experts from the Heavenly Sword sect were about to speak, their voices came to an abrupt halt. Their eyes were wide open as if they had seen something unbelievable. What's going on? Seeing this, the other cultivators immediately looked in the direction of Chu Fengmian. Their expressions were exactly the same as those of the Tianjian sect experts. Under the cover of the power of natal sword origin, the power of destruction on Chu Fengmian's body was dispelled little by little. It was not dispelled, but devoured. On Chu Fengmian's body, the power of destruction had almost invaded his internal organs. The power of destruction in Chu Fengmian's spiritual meridians was forcibly pulled out by the power of natal sword origin and sucked into it. Chapter 2306. What's this? His natal sword origin is actually devouring the power of destruction? How is this possible? Many experts exclaimed in shock. When Chu Fengmian's internal organs were corroded by the power of destruction, they thought he was dead for sure. Even an immortal emperor couldn't neutralize the power of destruction. But now, Chu Fengmian relied on his natal sword origin to pull out all the power of destruction from his body and devour it into his natal sword origin. This was beyond everyone's understanding. Chu Fengmian didn't care about other people's surprise. Instead, he wholeheartedly urged his natal sword origin to devour the power of destruction. The power of destruction was the power of heavenly punishment. It wasn't something that could be resisted by human strength. Even the heaven-devouring secret technique, which was known to devour heaven and earth, would be somewhat powerless in the face of the power of destruction. Even though the heaven-devouring beast was an innate divine beast, it was still slightly inferior to the heavenly Tao and the power of heavenly punishment. But Chu Fengmian's natal sword origin was condensed from the power of creation. The power of heavenly punishment and the power of destruction were essentially part of the power of creation. The power of creation that Chu Fengmian first obtained was from the heavenly tribulation. Therefore, the power of destruction that even immortal emperors were helpless against was not something that Chu Fengmian couldn't resist. After his body was tempered by lightning, Chu Fengmian didn't intend to let go of the power of destruction. He integrated it into his natal sword origin. Chu Fengmian was no longer a pure sword cultivator. In order to hide the uniqueness of his natal sword origin, Chu Fengmian rarely used it. Therefore, his natal sword origin hadn't been improved for a long time. Now, the power of destruction was the best nourishment for Chu Fengmian's natal sword origin. As Chu Fengmian's power of destruction was devoured by his natal sword origin, his natal sword origin began to change constantly. At the same time, Chu Fengmian's aura rose steadily. Chu Fengmian's natal sword origin was condensed from the power of creation. The power of destruction was the best nourishment for Chu Fengmian's natal sword origin. The power of destruction was condensed by countless Tianjian sect experts in the flying immortal peaceful heavenly formation at the cost of their blood essence. It contained an enormous amount of power. This power now belonged to Chu Fengmian. It wasn't just Chu Fengmian's aura, even his immortal true body and 129,600 immortal crystals were refined to perfection under the tribulation lightning's refinement. Enduring the thunder of destruction this time could be said to have given Chu Fengmian an upgrade that was no less than a great opportunity. Thank you all for this great gift, but it's useless now. Die, all of you. Chu Fengmian laughed loudly. As the destructive lightning disappeared, Chu Fengmian's power exploded, and he rushed into the flying immortal titan heavenly formation. The power of his body was fully displayed. The shadows of progenitor Jianwang, the black whale and the heaven-devouring beast appeared behind Chu Fengmian. At the same time, two spiritual swords appeared in Chu Fengmian's hands. Chu Fengmian held two swords and rushed into the very peaceful sky array. In an instant, dozens of warriors from the Tianjian sect were killed by Chu Fengmian. Every time Chu Fengmian brandished his swords, it was enough to kill several powerhouses from the Tianjian sect. Immortal generals and immortal marquises couldn't resist Chu Fengmian's swords. Even immortal kings were no exception. Given Chu Fengmian's current strength, dealing with some injured immortal kings was like chopping vegetables. The moment Chu Fengmian condensed the third inscription, his strength had surpassed the peak of the immortal king realm and officially stepped into the immortal monarch realm. Peak immortal kings like Raging Flame Sword Emperor and Gongyang Xian might be able to contend with Chu Fengmian. Ordinary immortal kings couldn't withstand a single blow from Chu Fengmian. Following Chu Fengmian's wanton slaughter, the flying immortal titan heavenly formation was on the verge of collapse. The flying immortal titan heavenly formation could be condensed by relying on the strength of these Tianjian sect powerhouses. These Tianjian sect powerhouses were the formation eyes of the flying immortal titan heavenly formation, supporting the formation's power. Now, with Chu Fengmian's slaughter, more than half of the Tianjian sect powerhouses in the flying immortal titan heavenly formation had been killed. The flying immortal titan heavenly formation was almost unable to sustain itself and was becoming illusory. However, under the control of several Tianjian sect powerhouses, the flying immortal titan heavenly formation was still able to stop Chu Fengmian. Several times, Chu Fengmian's attacks were blocked by the flying immortal titan heavenly formation. Hindrance. Break for me. Chu Fengmian showed a somewhat impatient look. Suddenly, the power of his bloodline was added to the sword. Behind him, the two innate divine beasts, Tianlong and Xianjing, roared and attacked together with Chu Fengmian's sword. Dragon whale shatters the sea. Rumble. The power of the sword fiercely bombarded the flying immortal titan heavenly formation. Under this sword, the flying immortal titan heavenly formation was torn apart on the spot. Starting from this crack, the entire flying immortal titan heavenly formation began to crumble. The few experts of the Sky Sword sect who were still maintaining the flying immortal peaceful heavenly array were all killed by this single sword strike. The essence blood of all the Tianjian sect powerhouses who were killed was all absorbed by Chu Fengmian's heaven-devouring power. He needed a large amount of essence blood to condense inscriptions. Mosquitoes were still meat, so Chu Fengmian didn't intend to let any of them go. Through the heaven-devouring secret technique, clumps of essence blood were transformed into incomparably pure immortal power and poured into Chu Fengmian's body. On the other side, the moment the flying immortal titan heavenly formation shattered, a formation map suddenly flew out from it. This formation map was incomparably huge. Although it had lost its support, Chu Fengmian could clearly feel the power contained within it. The formation map of the flying immortal titan heavenly formation. The moment Chu Fengmian saw this formation map, he immediately made his move. With a thought, a dragon claw condensed above his head and immediately grabbed at the formation map of the flying immortal titan heavenly formation. Chu Fengmian had experienced the power of the flying immortal titan heavenly formation. It could be said that this time, if it weren't for the help of Alcade Star Emperor and the ancient desolate white wolf, Chu Fengmian wouldn't have been able to break through it. With the help of the flying immortal titan heavenly formation and the ancient desolate light Chu Fengmian had almost no hope of breaking through the flying immortal titan heavenly formation alone. With the flying immortal titan heavenly formation, the Tianjian sect almost had the capital to fight against immortal monarchs. This formation map was useless to Chu Fengmian, but if he could keep it in the Sword Dao sect, it would be a great trump card. After all, this formation map came from the Nine Heavens domain. It was a priceless treasure. How could Chu Fengmian let go of such a precious treasure? First, he set a small goal, such as 1 second. Remember, book guest residence. Chapter 2307. The barrier of the flying immortal peaceful heavenly array was instantly shattered by the battle dragon claw and fell into Chu Fengmian's hand. What a treasure! Chu Fengmian observed it casually and saw the countless mysteries contained in the flying immortal peaceful heavenly array. Even in the 3 sacred realms and the 9 realms, immortal masters were absolute powerhouses. The flying immortal peaceful heavenly array had reached a level where it could contend against immortal masters. Its mysteries were self-evident. Chu Fengmian glanced at it casually before putting it into his spatial ring. For Chu Fengmian, the most important thing now was to completely destroy the Tianjian sect. Chu Fengmian could go back and slowly comprehend the mysteries of the flying immortal peaceful heavenly array. Seeing the flying immortal peaceful heavenly array fall into Chu Fengmian's hands, Fan Jiansuo and the remaining Tianjian sect experts' faces became extremely gloomy. The flying immortal peaceful heavenly array could be said to be the most important treasure of the Tianjian sect. With the flying immortal peaceful heavenly array, the Tianjian sect had survived countless dangers, but now it had fallen into Chu Fengmian's hands. After losing the flying immortal peaceful heavenly array, the Tianjian sect had no chance of resisting Chu Fengmian. More than half of the Tianjian sect's experts had been killed or injured. Only Fan Jiansuo and the others were still resisting. 10,000 years of hard work, destroyed in a day. Seeing more than half of the Tianjian sect's experts dead or injured, Fan Jiansuo trembled and said, not knowing whether it was out of fear or anger. 10,000 years ago, when the Tianjian sect and the Sword Dao sect were enemies, we should have thought of this moment. Chu Fengmian said coldly. The Tianjian sect's calamity today was just a replica of the Sword Dao sect's calamity 10,000 years ago. Moreover, compared to the battle when the 7 great sects besieged the Tianjian sect, Chu Fengmian was much more merciful. The 7 great sects besieged the Sword Dao sect and killed them all. Even if it was a weak Sword Dao Gate disciple, they would not let any of them go. Today, Chu Fengmian had only killed the experts of the older generation of the Tianjian sect. As for the younger generation, he hadn't killed them all. This was already merciful enough. Little bastard. You win today. But you will die sooner or later. My Tianjian sect is a giant in the Tianjiu domain. Even the lord of the Sword Dao was killed by us. You will die as well. Fan Jiansuo said malevolently as if he didn't hear Chu Fengmian's words. Really? It's a pity you'll never see that day. Chu Fengmian was too lazy to argue. This Tianjian sect was just a branch of the 9 domains. Behind the 7 great sects were the giants of the 9 domains. Chu Fengmian was already clear about this. However, since they had shed all pretense of cordiality, Chu Fengmian was not afraid of anything. So what if they were the giants of Tianjiu regions? After passing the Deva tribulation, his strength would rise again. Even if it was the Tianjian sect of Tianjiu regions, Chu Fengmian would destroy it sooner or later. But today, he would destroy the Tianjian sect of the 9 domains first. Chu Fengmian looked coldly at Fan Jiansuo and the others. These people were the culprits who besieged the Sword Dao Gate. Chu Fengmian was willing to let those juniors go because they didn't participate in the siege of the Sword Dao Gate 10,000 years ago. However, Chu Fengmian had no reason to let Fan Jiansuo and the others go. Die! Chu Fengmian's figure flashed and rushed in the direction of Fan Jiansuo. Teleportation? This speed was so fast that people couldn't see the trajectory of Feng Mian's figure. This person's speed is so fast that it's unbelievable. Some warriors exclaimed. The Tianjian sect is finished. Looking at the Tianjian sect in the illusory space, which had turned into ruins under the aftermath of the Tianjian sect, some warriors couldn't help but sigh. This behemoth that had dominated the 9 domains for 10,000 years was destroyed by Chu Fengmian today. Previously, when the news that Chu Fengmian was preparing to attack the Tianjian sect came out, many people thought that Chu Fengmian was overestimating himself and seeking death. No one would have thought that it would turn out like this. The destruction of the Tianjian sect is just the beginning. I'm afraid that the remaining 6 sects will also take action. Some warriors were also clear in their hearts. The destruction of the Tianjian sect didn't represent the end. Instead, it was a beginning. The Tianjian sect wasn't the only sect that had a grudge against Chu Fengmian. Among the 7 great sects, there were 6 other sects besides the 6 demon sects. They were the culprits who besieged the Master of Sword Dao and the Sword Dao Gate. After destroying the Tianjian sect, Chu Fengmian wouldn't let them go. The sect master of the 6 demon sects, the Demon Emperor, had a life and death grudge against Chu Fengmian. It was rumored that Chu Fengmian had invaded the 6 demon sects alone and almost died. It could be said that with Chu Fengmian's character, he wouldn't let any of the 7 great sects go. The destruction of the Tianjian sect was just the beginning of Chu Fengmian's revenge. Boom! While everyone was talking, the battle in the air had already begun. Chu Fengmian's speed was so fast that even Fan Jiansuo couldn't react in time. Fan Jiansuo was seen retreating repeatedly to avoid Chu Fengmian's sword. However, his body was still covered in wounds. Even Fan Jiansuo, who was at the peak of the Immortal King realm, couldn't resist Chu Fengmian's attacks. This scene agitated everyone present even more. Chu Fengmian's rise had only happened in the past few years. Who would have thought that Chu Fengmian, who was still a junior a few years ago, would become such a terrifying existence that could destroy the 7 great sects? Even though they already knew Chu Fengmian's true identity as the Sword Dao genius Chu Jianbai from 10,000 years ago, they were still able to find out the trajectory of Chu Fengmian's rise. Chu Fengmian's rise in the past few years could be called a legend. Fan Jiansuo's body was covered in wounds in almost a breath's time. Under Chu Fengmian's sword, he kept retreating. His face was incomparably pale. Previously, when he fought with Chu Fengmian, he had almost used all his trump cards. Later, in order to activate the power of the Thunder of Destruction, he didn't hesitate to consume his essence blood to activate the secret technique. Now, his strength was less than 50%. Facing Chu Fengmian, he was almost losing ground. Chu Fengmian's every move was fierce. Almost in an instant, he was about to kill Fan Jiansuo. At this time, the Ancient White Wolf and the Alcade Star Emperor had also made their moves to kill the remaining Tianjian sect martial artists. Today, none of the Tianjian sect martial artists who had participated in the Battle of 10,000 Years were spared. Even some old guys who had been hiding were caught one by the Ancient White Wolf and the Alcade Star Emperor and killed on the spot. Now, Chu Fengmian only needed to deal with Fan Jiansuo. Die! Chu Fengmian's eyes flashed. Seeing Fan Jiansuo's carelessness, he immediately drew his sword and slashed at Fan Jiansuo's heart. Chapter 2308. Just as Chu Fengmian was about to finish off Fan Jiansuo with his sword, he suddenly sensed danger. Suddenly, Chu Fengmian felt a sense of danger. A burst of spatial fluctuations was transmitted from above him. Although the spatial fluctuations were extremely weak, Chu Fengmian, who possessed the bloodline of ancestor Jianwang, was extremely sensitive to spatial fluctuations. Therefore, he still detected it. Phantom. Chu Fengmian immediately activated his body movement technique and retreated. He even put away the sword that was about to kill Fan Jiansuo. The moment Chu Fengmian retreated, a colored glazed divine light suddenly fell from the sky and slashed down in the direction where Chu Fengmian had just been. When the colored glazed divine light descended, even Chu Fengmian could only withstand a little of its power. He actually felt his whole body trembling. Even Chu Fengmian's current physical body could barely withstand a part of the power at the edge of the colored glazed divine light. If Chu Fengmian was at the center of this power, his physical body would almost be shattered under the power of the colored glazed divine light. Chu Fengmian's strength was closely related to his powerful physical body. If he lost his physical body, he would lose more than 50% of his strength. At that time, Chu Fengmian might not even be able to defeat a peak immortal king expert. Right now, Chu Fengmian was invincible and could be said to be invincible. It was also because of his strength that the experts of the other 6 major sects were unwilling to face him at this time. However, if Chu Fengmian was injured, it would be absolutely different. The remaining 6 major sects would never seize this opportunity to eliminate Chu Fengmian. When the news spread, what awaited Chu Fengmian would be the encirclement of countless experts of the 6 major sections. It seemed that the remaining 6 major sects were now afraid of Chu Fengmian. None of them made a move, nor did anyone come to help the Tianjian sect. However, Chu Fengmian knew that the 6 major sects were just hiding their strength and waiting for an opportunity. They were waiting for the moment when Chu Fengmian was weakened. The person who shot out the colored glazed divine light knew this very well. This person had been hiding in the surrounding space and hadn't made a move. He was waiting for this opportunity. He planned to destroy Chu Fengmian's physical body with one move and weaken his strength. At that time, the experts of the 6 major sects would certainly take action and Chu Fengmian would undoubtedly die. The colored glazed divine light just now could be said to be extremely dangerous for Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian had almost capsized in the gutter. However, he didn't expect that Chu Fengmian's sensitivity to the power of space had reached such a level. Chu Fengmian had actually dodged this fatal blow. Senior brother. Sect master. The divine light and ancient white wolf didn't notice the sudden attack. When the colored glazed divine light was to be noticed, Mayans to attack, to be to die, to attack. Their expressions relaxed a little when they saw Chu Fengmian dodge the attack. However, their gazes still fell on the surrounding void. To attack, colored be to leave, was to be to the left, to be to leave. However, when they used their spiritual senses to explore the surrounding space, they didn't find anything. It was as if there was no one hiding in the space at all. However, that colored glass divine light would not appear for no reason or cause. Furthermore, it had deliberately waited for the moment when Chu Fengmian was planning to kill Fan Jiansuo so that it could attack Chu Fengmian when he least expected it. All of this wasn't a coincidence. Chu Fengmian's eyes scanned the surrounding void and he suddenly sneered. Wu Yinling, I didn't expect you to still be alive. Chu Fengmian already knew who the person who launched the sneak attack was. Wu Yinling was one of the oldest ancestors of the Sage Monarch sect. She was also an anomaly in the Sage Monarch sect. The people who dared to sneak attack Chu Fengmian were obviously very confident in their own abilities. That was why they dared to sneak attack Chu Fengmian. Among the 7 major sects, only one person had such ability. She was Wu Yinling. Therefore, Chu Fengmian didn't need to guess the identity of this person. Wu Yinling came from the Sage Monarch sect, but she was different from the other disciples and ancestors of the Sage Monarch sect. The Sage Monarch sect was a sect that cultivated the Tao of body refinement and was good at fighting head-on. They had always relied on brute force to win over their opponents. However, there was an anomaly in the sage monarch sect. She was Wu Yinling. Wu Yinling was as timid as a mouse. She was completely different from the other disciples of the sage monarch sect. She had inherited the legendary escape god Yinling's escape technique, which was unparalleled in the world. With this escape technique, she was able to sneak attack and escape successfully. In the end, she became one of the strongest people in the sage monarch sect. She had already reached the peak of the immortal king realm 10,000 years ago. Now, Wu Yinling's attack was even more powerful than what Chu Fengmian remembered. Obviously, Wu Yinling's strength had made a breakthrough in the past 10,000 years. Even if she hadn't stepped into the immortal duke realm, she was at least a half-step immortal duke. If there was an assassin, the number one assassin in the 9 regions would definitely be Wu Yinling. It seemed that after Chu Fengmian destroyed the Tianjian sect, the other 6 sects couldn't sit still anymore. Even Wu Yinling had taken action. Wu Yinling's escape technique was unparalleled. Her method of hiding her aura was also extremely mysterious. She had silently sneaked up to Chu Fengmian's side without Chu Fengmian noticing. If Chu Fengmian hadn't felt a slight spatial fluctuation when Wu Yinling launched her sneak attack, he wouldn't have been able to dodge the colored glazed divine light just now. If it were any other peak immortal king realm expert, they wouldn't even have the time to react before being killed by Wu Yinling. Wu Yinling. It's him? Alcade Star Emperor's eyes revealed a hint of fear when she heard the name. Obviously, she had also heard of Wu Yinling's name. In particular, the colored glazed divine light just now was aimed at Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian relied on his sensitivity to the space Dao to dodge it. If the target was Alcade Star Emperor, it was almost impossible for him to detect it. Even if he could withstand the power of the colored glazed divine light, he would lose a layer of skin. Even if he didn't die, he would be seriously injured. This kind of assassin was the most dreaded among all the martial artists. However, for an assassin, the most unfavorable moment for him was to expose his identity after the assassination failed. The moment Chu Fengmian said the 3 words Wu Yinling, the surrounding space changed crazily, as if a piece of space was flying into the distance. At this moment, everyone realized that Wu Yinling had turned into a piece of space. No wonder they couldn't detect her with their spiritual consciousness. Chapter 2309. Wu Yinling's escape technique had already been cultivated to the pinnacle, allowing her to become one with space. The fleeing god was also an invincible overlord during the primordial era. It was said that he wasn't human, but a unique alien race. During the primordial era, there were hundreds of races. Aside from the primordial 100 races, there were countless other alien races. For example, the Amethyst Stone Man tribe, which seemed incomparably mysterious and unimaginable now, could be considered a large tribe during the primordial era. Some of the rare alien races only had a few or dozens of them. Once they encountered a calamity, the entire tribe would be completely wiped out. During the Great Primordial Calamity, there were thousands of races that were completely wiped out. The fleeing god's understanding of the escape technique was unmatched by any expert of the later generations. Wu Yinling had inherited the fleeing god's inheritance. His sneak attacks were almost always successful. Generally, those who were ambushed by him would be severely injured, if not killed. It was enough for him to escape unscathed. But this time, he had come to ambush Chu Fengmian, but he had kicked an iron plate. The moment he heard that Chu Fengmian had recognized him, Wu Yinling did not hesitate. He immediately urged the escape light to escape into the distance. It's Wu Yinling. It's actually him. Wu Yinling came to ambush Chu Fengmian and wanted to kill him, but he failed. When Wu Yinling made a move, she actually failed. Many people only recognized the identity of the person who had ambushed him after hearing Chu Fengmian's words. Many people's faces were filled with shock. Wu Yinling's name might not be known by the younger generation, but the experts of the older generation of the 9 regions had heard of it. Even at the mention of this name, there was a hint of fear in their eyes. Wu Yinling, the strongest patriarch of the Sage Monarch sect and the top assassin of the 9 regions, had won every battle. No one who had been targeted by him had ever been able to escape his assassination. But now, Chu Fengmian had dodged Wu Yinling's assassination so easily. He had even recognized Wu Yinling's identity at a glance. Many people were stunned by his nonchalance. "Since you're here, there's no need to escape." While everyone was still in shock, Chu Fengmian's figure flashed, and he suddenly chased after Wu Yinling. The colored glazed divine radiance that Wu Yinling had launched a sneak attack on Chu Fengmian. She had gathered all her strength and unleashed her strongest attack. However, this attack was neutralized by Chu Fengmian. Wu Yinling had almost no means of injuring Chu Fengmian now. Letting Wu Yinling go today would be a huge disaster in the future. Wu Yinling's sneak attack was unexpected and impossible to guard against. Although Chu Fengmian was preparing to kill Fan Jiansuo, Chu Fengmian still carefully observed the surrounding space. Only then did he notice Wu Yinling's sneak attack. If Chu Fengmian was fighting with a powerful enemy, he wouldn't be able to divert his attention to investigate his surroundings. If Wu Yinling chose this moment to launch a sneak attack, Chu Fengmian would also fall into an extremely dangerous situation. If Wu Yinling was not killed, she would be a disaster sooner or later. Moreover, since Wu Yinling dared to launch a sneak attack on Chu Fengmian had no reason to let her go. Wu Yinling's escape light was extremely fast. His two strongest points were sneak attacks and escape. This was also the reason why Wu Yinling was always victorious. Even if he encountered an expert that he couldn't fight back, he could still use his escape light to escape. Her escape light was much faster than any martial artist or Yao immortal that Chu Fengmian had ever seen. However, Chu Fengmian's escape light was even faster. In the blink of an eye, Chu Fengmian's figure transformed into primogenitor Jianwang's appearance and suddenly rushed in Wu Yinling's direction. His escape light was extremely fast, even faster than Wu Yinling's speed. Chu Fengmian transformed into primogenitor Tianlong and caught up to Wu Yinling in an instant. Wu Yinling's expression changed when she saw Chu Fengmian suddenly appear behind her. Before she could react, a huge dragon claw viciously slammed toward her. Rumble! Along with the war dragon's claw, a powerful dragon might swept through the surrounding space. Crack! Suddenly, the space that Wu Yinling had transformed into was shattered by this force. At the same time, a thin and small elder emerged from it. This thin and small elder was Wu Yinling. Although Wu Yinling was from the Sage Monarch sect, she didn't cultivate the Sage Monarch sect's way of body refining. Her physical body was even weaker than an ordinary martial artist's. Even though Wu Yinling was already half a step away from becoming a celestial duke, he still coughed out a mouthful of blood after taking on the might of the claw attack. Half of his body had been shattered. Boundless heaven and earth! Seeing that his attack had failed, Chu Fengmian was about to launch another attack when Wu Yinling's figure suddenly became illusory. Wu Yinling rapidly retreated, leaving behind streaks of rainbow-colored light as he retreated. It was like a path of colored glaze floating in the air. Wu Yinling's escape light was unimaginably fast. Chu Fengmian wanted to stop her, but it was too late. Wu Yinling's escape light was so fast that Chu Fengmian didn't even have the chance to stop her. Seeing Wu Yinling escape into the distance, Chu Fengmian didn't continue to pursue her. He also knew that it would be futile to continue the chase. As expected of someone who has inherited the inheritance of the god of flight. She does have some skills. Chu Fengmian couldn't help but mutter to himself when he saw this scene. He wanted to kill Wu Yinling on the spot, but failed. However, this time, it wasn't a complete loss. At least, Wu Yinling had suffered serious injuries from the battle dragon's claw. Moreover, his escape light was beyond his realm. Even if Wu Yinling had inherited the god of flight, it should be a kind of supreme secret technique. There was a price to pay for using any kind of secret technique. Wu Yinling was already seriously injured. She even used a secret technique to escape from Chu Fengmian, which made her injuries even worse. At the very least, Wu Yinling wouldn't be able to recover without a few thousand years. The higher the realm of the martial artist and demon immortal, the more difficult it was for them to recover once they were injured. Given Wu Yinling's cultivation, he was already halfway into the high immortal realm. Most of the mystical items and ancient sacred pills would have little effect on him. If he wanted to recover from his injuries, he would need immortal pills and immortal herbs. Even though Sage Monarch's sect was the first of the 7 major sects, it didn't have many immortal pills and elixirs. At least in the short term, Wu Yinling was no longer a threat. Even if Wu Yinling could recover in the future, Chu Fengmian would have already passed the Deva tribulation and stepped into the Deva realm by then. If Wu Yinling dared to launch a sneak attack on Chu Fengmian at that time, she would be courting death. Chapter 23:10. Let's go! Looking at Wu Yinling's departing figure, Chu Fengmian turned around and flew in the direction of the Tianjian sect. On the other side, the other experts of the Tianjian sect who had fled in all directions had all been killed by the joint forces of the Alcade Star Emperor and the ancient White Wolf. Under the joint pursuit of Alcade Star Emperor and Primordial White Wolf, 2 peak immortal king experts, no one could escape in front of them. While Chu Fengmian was chasing Wu Yinling, Fan Jiansuo had also been killed by Chu Fengmian. The experts of the older generation of the Tianjian sect had all been killed. None of them had escaped alive. The Tianjian sect is completely finished. Some warriors couldn't help but murmur when they saw this scene. Even if Chu Fengmian died in the future, the Tianjian sect would definitely fall in the future after suffering such a great calamity. Even if a sect had some inheritances, it was not a good thing to have these inheritances without the protection of the experts. Instead, it was a disaster. Many sects in the 9 regions also wanted to replace the Tianjian sect and become one of the 7 major sects. Now that the Tianjian sect had suffered such a calamity and all the experts had died, it was an opportunity for the other 9 region sects. However, Chu Fengmian didn't care about these things. What he wanted to do was to completely destroy the Tianjian sect. As for who the inheritances would fall into in the end, Chu Fengmian didn't care. Most of the Tianjian sect's swordsmanship inheritances originated from the Shangjian sect. The Shangjian sect's inheritances had already been obtained by Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian didn't care about these inheritances at all. In contrast, the Tianjian sect's resources, which had been accumulated for tens of thousands of years, were what Chu Fengmian wanted the most. The Tianjian sect had dominated the 9 regions for tens of thousands of years. The amount of resources it had accumulated was definitely an astronomical figure. In particular, during the upheaval of the 9 regions this time, a large number of benefits had actually been obtained by the 7 major sects. As the local tyrants of the 9 regions, the 7 major sects controlled most of the areas of the 9 regions. All of the treasures that appeared were collected by the 7 great sections. Chu Fengmian had come to attack the Tianjian sect for 2 reasons. First, his identity had been exposed, so there was no need for him to hide anymore. He had come to attack the Tianjian sect for revenge. Secondly, Chu Fengmian wanted to obtain the resources that the Tianjian sect had accumulated over the past 10,000 years. Chu Fengmian's figure flashed, and he immediately arrived in the small world of the Tianjian sect. Now, the barrier protecting this small world couldn't even withstand a single blow from Chu Fengmian. With a casual strike, Chu Fengmian shattered the barrier protecting this small world and stepped into the Sky Sword sect. At a glance, many of the magnificent and tall palaces on the mountains of the Tianjian sect had been reduced to ruins. The aftermath of the battle between Chu Fengmian and Fan Jiansuo had already messed up the Tianjian sect. Chu Fengmian didn't pay attention to this dilapidated scene. Instead, he opened his spiritual sense and flew in the direction of the tallest mountain. Break! However, this mountain wasn't affected by the aftermath of the battle. The top of the mountain was shimmering with a restrictive array that blocked all of the aftermath of the battle between Chu Fengmian and Fan Jiansuo. In the ruins of the Tianjian sect, this mountain appeared to be very special. The restrictive array set up on this mountain was at least strong enough to withstand the attack of a peak immortal king. However, it was much more powerful than the great array set up outside the Sky Sword City. There must be something extremely important to the Tianjian sect on this mountain to be able to set up such a powerful restrictive array to protect it. Chu Fengmian glanced at the array on the mountain. Suddenly, his mind moved, and a surge of devouring heaven power suddenly erupted. This surge of devouring heaven power erupted from Chu Fengmian's body and immediately turned into a devouring heaven python, which drilled into the array. In a few breaths of time, the array eyes on the array were directly devoured by the devouring heaven python, and the entire array shattered with a loud bang. Boom! On the mountain, the doors of the palaces opened with a loud bang. For a moment, countless lights of treasure shot up into the sky. In these palaces, there were a large number of elixirs, spiritual weapons, and all kinds of strange objects. Just as Chu Fengmian had guessed, this mountain was actually the treasury of the Tianjian sect. The Tianjian sect was one of the 7 major sects. In an instant, it had dominated the 9 regions for 10,000 years. The amount of elixirs and spiritual weapons it had accumulated had reached an unimaginable level. Chu Fengmian looked over and was amazed. Even he had never seen so many elixirs and spiritual weapons piled up together. The palaces were completely filled with elixirs and spiritual weapons. There were so many elixirs and spiritual weapons. Although they were useless to Chu Fengmian, they were a great harvest for the Sword Dao sect. The weakest point of the Sword Dao sect established by Chu Fengmian was its foundation. Without the support of a large number of elixirs and spiritual weapons, it would be difficult for a sect to rise. Now, the elixirs and spiritual weapons in the Tianjian sect could be left to the Sword Dao sect. Collect. Chu Fengmian didn't look carefully. He immediately activated the sky-devouring secret technique. The palaces were forcibly uprooted and collected by a huge force. Seeing Chu Fengmian collect the palaces directly, the martial artists and demonic deities who were watching this scene from a distance were going crazy with jealousy. They had never seen so many elixirs and spiritual weapons. One of the palaces was even filled with divine elixirs. There were hundreds of thousands of divine elixirs, which made many people go crazy. They couldn't wait to snatch them. However, no matter how greedy they were, the greed in their hearts was suppressed the moment they saw Chu Fengmian's figure. The Tianjian sect had been destroyed by Chu Fengmian. Anyone who dared to snatch it at this time was simply courting death. No one dared to provoke Chu Fengmian at this time. They could only watch as Chu Fengmian collected the treasures. However, there were still some martial artists and demonic deities who quietly followed Chu Fengmian and searched the places where Chu Fengmian had collected the treasures. They could still find some remnants. Chu Fengmian collected the treasures one by one. He didn't even bother to collect the smaller treasuries. These treasuries were all taken by the other martial artists and demonic deities. For them, even the resources in a small treasury were a huge fortune. Chu Fengmian flew and collected the palaces one by one. He had already collected a total of 21 palaces. A large number of divine elixirs, spiritual weapons, and various mysterious items fell into Chu Fengmian's hands. The treasury where the real treasures are stored isn't here? It wasn't until Chu Fengmian had searched the entire mountain and collected 30 palaces that he slowly came to a stop. Chapter 23:11. Although Chu Fengmian had collected the treasures of 30 palaces, he had been keeping an eye on them. However, Chu Fengmian had been paying attention the entire time. He had yet to obtain the true treasures. Obviously, the Tianjian sect's most important treasure trove was not on this mountain peak. Chu Fengmian's most important purpose in attacking the Tianjian sect was to obtain the Sword Dao totems in the Tianjian sect. The master of the Sword Dao once possessed 3 Sword Dao totems. With the fall of the master of the Sword Dao and the destruction of the Sword Dao sect, these totems had all fallen into the hands of the Tianjian sect. Chu Fengmian had won a Sword Dao totem from the Tianjian sect during the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. Therefore, there should be 2 more Sword Dao totems in the Tianjian sect. Chu Fengmian had chosen to attack the Tianjian sect because of these 2 Sword Dao totems. The Sword Dao totems were the most precious treasures of the Sword Dao. The incomplete swordsmanship hidden in the deepest part of the Sword Dao totems was the most precious treasure for sword cultivators to comprehend the origin of the Sword Dao. Chu Fengmian's current understanding of the Sword Dao could surpass that of his previous life, surpass the immortal Emperor Sword Dao, and reach the level of half a step into the origin of the Sword Dao. This was because Chu Fengmian had comprehended the incomplete sword art in the Sword Dao totem. This incomplete swordsmanship must have been scattered among the 19 Sword Dao totems. As long as he obtained all 19 Sword Dao totems, he would be able to complete the swordsmanship. At that time, he would be able to comprehend the origin of the Sword Dao. Chu Fengmian wanted to surpass any sword cultivator since ancient times and comprehend the origin of the Sword Dao. This Sword Dao totem was something he had to obtain. Moreover, it was not only for comprehending the origin of the Sword Dao. The swordsmanship recorded in the Sword Dao totem was also very useful for Chu Fengmian's Sword Dao ancient book. Every time Chu Fengmian obtained a Sword Dao totem, his strength would advance by leaps and bounds and reach a new level. If Chu Fengmian could obtain these 2 sword totems, his strength would reach a whole new level. The most important thing for Chu Fengmian in this attack on the Tianjian sect was to obtain these 2 Sword Dao totems. But now, Chu Fengmian had collected a total of 30 palaces, but he didn't see any trace of the Sword Dao totem. Moreover, Chu Fengmian didn't see any Sword Dao totems, immortal weapons, immortal pills, or divine objects. The Tianjian sect was the overlord of the 9 regions, a colossus that had reigned supreme for tens of thousands of years. Even a faction like the Sky-Reaching Pavilion had immortal weapons and immortal pills. The Tianjian sect was even more powerful than the Sky-Reaching Pavilion, so it was impossible for them not to have a single immortal pill. Clearly, the treasury that stored such immortal items and immortal pills was somewhere else. These immortal weapons and immortal elixirs were the most important things to a sect. The Tianjian sect would not feel the pinch even if they lost some ordinary elixirs and spiritual weapons. However, each and every one of these immortal artifacts and immortal pills were extremely difficult to obtain. Thus, the Heavenly Sword sect must have hidden these supreme treasures. But now, there was no place in the entire Tianjian sect that could be hidden from Chu Fengmian's eyes. Chu Fengmian's mind moved. Suddenly, the surrounding space fell into Chu Fengmian's control. Chu Fengmian had a panoramic view of every corner of the small world of the Tianjian sect. Chu Fengmian explored this place bit by bit. Suddenly, he saw a huge palace under the ground of this mountain. This palace was more majestic than any of the palaces in the Sky Sword sect. Countless restrictive arrays had been set up on top of this palace. However, these restrictive arrays were not for defense, but for concealment. Even immortal kings or immortal monarchs might not be able to detect the presence of this palace. Chu Fengmian's comprehension of the space Dao had reached a very high level. He could control the space of the entire small world of the Tianjian sect. That was how he discovered this palace. Given how much effort they had put into hiding this palace, it was likely that this palace was where the true treasures of the Sky Sword sect were stored. Come out. Chu Fengmian looked at the mountain below. Suddenly, he reached out and grabbed it. A giant hand of spiritual energy, tens of thousands of feet in size, suddenly grabbed down, and the entire mountain was forcibly pulled up by Chu Fengmian. The power to move mountains and fill seas. In the past, Chu Fengmian had thought this power was almost mythical. But now, Chu Fengmian could easily do it. It was extremely easy for him to uproot such a tall mountain. Rumble. As the mountain was uprooted by Chu Fengmian, a majestic palace appeared at the bottom of the mountain. This is the treasure trove. The real treasure trove of the Tianjian sect. Many of the spectating martial artists and Yao gods could tell that this palace was different from the other palaces that Chu Fengmian had taken away. Spiritual chalcedony. This palace was completely carved out of spiritual chalcedony. Someone exclaimed when he saw the almost transparent material above the palace. Spiritual chalcedony. Such a huge spiritual chalcedony. Spiritual jade was a material used to make jade bottles and jade boxes. It could seal spiritual energy and immortal power so that the elixirs inside could maintain their efficacy. Generally, warriors and Yao gods would carry some jade bottles and jade boxes made of spiritual jade with them to hold elixirs. Spiritual chalcedony was the essence of spiritual jade. It was more effective than spiritual jade in sealing spiritual energy and immortal power. Some spiritual chalcedony could be found in some spiritual jade veins. But now, the whole palace was carved out of spiritual chalcedony. Almost no one had ever seen such a huge spiritual chalcedony. What a great work! Alcade Star Emperor couldn't help but exclaim. Although spiritual chalcedony couldn't be used for cultivation for warriors and Yao gods, it was priceless as the best material to seal spiritual elixirs and immortal elixirs. A small piece of spiritual chalcedony was worth a lot. The whole palace was made of spiritual chalcedony. It was really shocking. Just this palace alone was priceless. Even some of the smaller sects would not be able to build such a spirit jade essence palace. The treasures in this palace must be priceless. The Tianjian sect didn't hesitate to spend so much spiritual chalcedony to build such a palace. Open! Chu Fengmian saw the spiritual chalcedony palace. He didn't collect it directly like before. Spiritual chalcedony was very fragile. If it was uprooted, it could destroy the palace. Such a spiritual chalcedony palace was useful to him. The real treasure trove isn't here. It wasn't until Chu Fengmian had searched the entire mountain and collected 30 palaces that he slowly came to a stop. Chapter 23:12. There was no need for Chu Fengmian to destroy these formations and restrictions. Chu Fengmian would feel it was a pity to destroy such a palace made entirely of spirit chalcedony. He directly descended and arrived in front of the spirit jade essence palace, before he slowly pushed open the door. The moment the door was opened, a rich medicinal fragrance wafted out from within. The surrounding warriors and Yao gods looked over, but they couldn't see clearly what was inside the door. Chu Fengmian stepped into it. Alcade Star Emperor and the ancient white wolf followed closely behind. Just as the three of them entered the spirit chalcedony palace, the door closed with a loud bang. Not only could spirit chalcedony seal the medicinal efficacy, but it could also block the spiritual sense of warriors and Yao gods. No matter how strong the spiritual sense of an expert was, he couldn't see the situation inside the spirit chalcedony palace from the outside. This caused many people to sigh. However, they also knew that no matter what kind of treasure was in the spirit chalcedony palace, it had nothing to do with them. It all belonged to Chu Fengmian. If this person doesn't die, he will become a great person in the future. The same thought flashed through the minds of many martial artists and Yao gods. Chu Fengmian had attacked the Tianjian sect, which meant that he had completely fallen out with the 7 sections. Even if Chu Fengmian stopped today, the other 6 sects would be in danger. At that time, there would be a decisive battle with Chu Fengmian. The experts of the 6 sects didn't take action because they were stalling for time. The ancient white wolf was a great help to Chu Fengmian. It wasn't a real wild beast, but a clone. As long as they delayed, the ancient white wolf would disappear. At that time, Chu Fengmian would lose a great help. At that time, the other 6 sects would take action and besiege Chu Fengmian. This would be a disaster for Chu Fengmian. However, today, Chu Fengmian had defeated the Tianjian sect. The wealth that the Tianjian sect had accumulated for thousands of years was all in Chu Fengmian's pocket. These resources would also increase Chu Fengmian's strength to an incredible level. It could be said that if Chu Fengmian could survive this disaster, when Chu Fengmian's strength improved in the future, the 7 sects would be vulnerable in his eyes. Chu Fengmian was also aware of this. He didn't hesitate to break through the formation to buy time. He attacked the Tianjian sect first because he wanted to use the many treasures of the sword principle in the Tianjian sect to improve his strength. Chu Fengmian knew that the 6 major sects were just stalling for time. Before the ancient white wolf's incarnation disappeared completely, Chu Fengmian had to improve his strength. If Chu Fengmian wanted to improve his strength further, the first thing he needed to do was to kill a large number of experts and use their essence blood to condense the inscriptions. However, this was already extremely harsh. Even after Chu Fengmian had killed so many experts from the Tianjian sect, he was still unable to condense the 4th inscription of the immortal true body. he was still a little short of condensing the embryonic form. The formation of each immortal true body inscription was 10 times more difficult than the previous one. Since he couldn't do this for the time being, Chu Fengmian was left with the second option. That was to obtain the sword principle totem, comprehend the swordsmanship in it, and integrate it into the ancient book of sword principle to improve his strength. Apart from the power of his bloodline, Chu Fengmian's greatest strength was the ancient book of sword principle that he had created. The ancient book of sword principle was a treasure of sword principle that Chu Fengmian had created. It was closely related to Chu Fengmian's strength. The more swordsmanship that was integrated into the ancient book of sword principle, the stronger Chu Fengmian's strength would be. When he stepped into the Spirit Jade Essence Palace, the first thing he looked for was the ancient book of sword principle. However, the first thing he saw was not the ancient book of sword principle, but the jade bottles beside it. Every single one of these jade bottles was carved out of spirit chalcedony, and they all contained some elixirs. Chu Fengmian could smell the fragrance of the elixirs the moment he approached the jade bottles. Even the jade bottles carved from spirit jade essence couldn't completely conceal the medicinal efficacy within them. Immortal elixirs. These are all immortal elixirs. Chu Fengmian took a look and confirmed that the contents of the jade bottles were all immortal elixirs. They were elixirs that surpassed divine elixirs and were refined from legendary immortal elixirs. It was said that immortal elixirs could only be refined by the alchemists of the 4 great sacred realms. However, Chu Fengmian had bought some immortal elixirs from the Sky-Reaching Pavilion. This also proved that there were immortal elixirs in the 9 regions. If the Sky-Reaching Pavilion had them, the Tianjian sect would naturally have them as well. Although there weren't many immortal elixirs, there were still dozens of them in total. Although Chu Fengmian couldn't immediately identify the origin of these immortal elixirs, he couldn't be bothered to identify them one by one. He opened the empty ring and put all the jade bottles inside. In addition to the immortal elixirs, there were also jade boxes placed in the cabinet beside him. They contained immortal elixirs that Chu Fengmian had never seen before. They exuded an incomparably pure immortal power. In addition, there were a few immortal artifacts hanging on the wall. On the ground, in some inconspicuous places, there were some ordinary stones that contained incredible power. In this spirit jade marrow, even the most inconspicuous treasure would be fought over by countless immortal marquises and even immortal kings. So many good things. Alcade Star Emperor glanced at them from the side and was extremely shocked. Even she had never seen so many treasures. The Tianjian sect had dominated the 9 regions for thousands of years. During the upheaval of the 9 regions, they had reaped countless benefits. The treasures in this treasury were dazzling and dazzling, making one unable to look at them all. Even Alcade Star Emperor and Chu Fengmian couldn't recognize many of the treasures. They could only feel the extremely pure power from them. Collect. 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 Chu Fengmian didn't have time to identify the origin of these treasures. Anyway, they were all stored in the empty ring. In the future, Chu Fengmian could use the memory of the Sword Emperor crown to identify these treasures one by one. Now, Chu Fengmian didn't intend to waste time on identifying these treasures. It had been half an hour since he left the depths of the void to the end of the attack on the Tianjian sect and found the Tianjian sect's treasury. The ancient white wolf incarnation could only last for half an hour. Now, it had consumed half of its power. For Chu Fengmian, there were only half an hour left. Since Chu Fengmian had attacked the 7 major sects this time, his goal wasn't just to destroy the Tianjian sect. He wanted to take this opportunity to destroy a few more sections. Chapter 23:13. Since they had already shed all pretense of cordiality, Chu Fengmian didn't mind attacking a few more sects to plunder their resources. The Tianjian sect was only Chu Fengmian's first target. The 7 major sects probably wouldn't take the initiative to besiege Chu Fengmian before the primordial white wolf's incarnation completely disappeared. Although the primordial white wolf's incarnation was at the pinnacle of the immortal king realm, its true form was a ferocious beast at the pinnacle of the immortal lord realm. The power unleashed by this incarnation could easily deal with 2 or 3 pinnacle immortal kings. The 7 major sects weren't willing to pay such a huge price for an incarnation. The remaining 30 minutes were also the last time Chu Fengmian could make his move. Once the primordial White Wolf's incarnation dissipated in 30 minutes, what awaited Chu Fengmian would be the revenge of the 7 major sections. These 30 minutes were the last time Chu Fengmian had to improve his strength. Chu Fengmian opened the empty ring and frantically stored all the treasures in the Spirit Chalcedony Palace into the empty ring. Regardless of whether these treasures were useful to him, he stored them all in the Spirit Chalcedony Palace. Just as Chu Fengmian was about to empty the Spirit Chalcedony Palace, he suddenly noticed 2 wooden totems that were as tall as a person in the depths of the palace. These 2 wooden totems were engraved with ancient patterns. The ancient patterns recorded extremely ancient swordsmanship. However, most sword cultivators couldn't see any of its mysteries. If a sword cultivator obtained a sword principle totem, he could use it to establish a major sect. For example, the origin of the Oceansward sect in the Sunhai Star Zone was a sword principle totem. Out of the 19 sword principle totems, 4 had fallen into Chu Fengmian's hands. They were the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 19th totems. Chu Fengmian's sword principle relied on the incomplete swordsmanship he comprehended from these 4 sword principle totems. He had taken a step further and touched the threshold of the sword principle origin. The importance of the sword principle totems to Chu Fengmian was self-evident. Moreover, it wasn't just the incomplete swordsmanship. The countless ancient swordsmanship recorded in the sword principle totems had greatly improved Chu Fengmian's ancient swordsmanship books. Although the swordsmanship of later generations was passed down from the swordsmanship of the sword principle totem. However, every warrior's comprehension of the sword principle totem was at a different level. The sword principles they comprehended were also different. Many sword principles were not complete. What was derived was only a small part of the sword principles recorded in the sword principle totem. Only the swordsmanship recorded in the sword principle totem was the oldest and most orthodox swordsmanship. Chu Fengmian wanted to condense the Sword Dao ancient book and gather all the sword arts in the world. Chu Fengmian wanted to comprehend all the sword arts in the 19 Sword Dao totems. The sword essence emitted by the 2 sword principle totems was obviously much stronger than the 19th sword principle totem. However, it was slightly weaker than the 4th sword principle totem. There were a total of 19 sword principle totems. The higher the sword principle totem, the more sword principle totems recorded, and the more profound the sword principle totems recorded. Chu Fengmian estimated that the arrangement of these 2 sword Dao totems should be able to enter the top 10. Chu Fengmian's sword essence condensed and shrouded the 2 sword principle totems. If the sword principle totems were given to an ordinary person, or even to some weak sword cultivators, they would only treat the sword principle totems as a piece of broken wood. They would be completely useless. This was also why the sword principle totems were the most precious sword principle treasures on many continents. This was because they simply couldn't comprehend the mysteries of the sword principle totems. It was just like how Chu Fengmian had spent some spirit stones to buy a sword principle totem at the auction in the Daluo Star Domain. However, for a sword cultivator like Chu Fengmian, each sword principle totem was like a huge treasure that was priceless. Even if Chu Fengmian was given 10 immortal artifacts, he wouldn't exchange them for a sword principle totem. As Chu Fengmian's sword essence shrouded them, the information of the 2 sword principle totems also entered Chu Fengmian's mind. These 2 sword principle totems were ranked 7th and 8th respectively. They were the sword principle totems that the sword principle master once possessed. The Tianjian sect's 3 sword principle totems were originally snatched from the sword principle sect. When he saw the 2 sword principle totems, Chu Fengmian's eyes revealed a bit of nostalgia. 10,000 years ago, Chu Fengmian had seen these 2 sword principle totems in the hands of the sword principle master. However, at that time, Chu Fengmian didn't have any spiritual power and couldn't comprehend the mysteries of the sword principle totems. He could only look at them. In the blink of an eye, things had changed. The Tianjian sect had plundered countless treasures from the sword principle sect. Now, all of them had been snatched back by Chu Fengmian. Even the Tianjian sect had been destroyed in Chu Fengmian's hands. Oh? There's a third one? Just as Chu Fengmian was sizing up the two sword principal totems, he suddenly sensed a sword essence in the corner of the palace. There was a pile of immortal stones piled up in this corner. At a rough estimate, there were at least hundreds of thousands of immortal stones. Immortal stones were incomparably precious even in the outer realm. However, in the Tianjian sect, they had accumulated quite a few immortal stones over the past 10,000 years. There were at least hundreds of thousands of them. These immortal stones were piled up in a corner. Chu Fengmian didn't pay much attention to them. He had needed a large amount of immortal stones before because he needed a large amount of immortal power to support his breakthrough to the Nine Tribulations Emperor Gu. Now, immortal stones weren't that important to Chu Fengmian anymore. Although Chu Fengmian's power was spiritual power, it had been fused with a little bit of primal chaos power and genesis power. In essence, it was already a bit stronger than immortal power. Even swallowing immortal stones wouldn't increase Chu Fengmian's strength by much. However, he hadn't expected that there would be a sword principal totem hidden in this immortal stone. Chu Fengmian walked over and took out a wooden totem from the immortal stone. Sure enough, it was another sword principal totem. There were a total of 3 sword principal totems in the Tianjian sect's treasure vault. Unlike the previous 2 sword principal totems, this sword principal totem wasn't the original sword principal totem of the sword principal sect. The sword principal sect used to have 3 sword principal totems, the 7th, the 8th, and the 19th. Of these 3 sword principal totems, Chu Fengmian had obtained the 19th sword principal totem during his bet with the Tianjian sect during the 9 Regions Genius Battle. Chu Fengmian had just obtained the 7th and 8th sword principal totems. There was also a sword Dao totem that didn't belong to the sword Dao sect. It should have belonged to the Sky Sword sect in the first place. The Tianjian sect was one of the 7 great sects of the 9 regions. It was also the only sword principal sect among them. It wouldn't be normal if they didn't have a sword principal totem. Chapter 23:14. As Chu Fengmian's sword essence shrouded the totem, all the swordsmanship recorded in it appeared one after another. It was the 5th-ranked sword principal totem. The Tianjian sect's sword principal totem was ranked higher than the 3 sword principal totems of the sword principal sect. It was ranked 5th. This was a pleasant surprise. This time, Chu Fengmian obtained a total of 3 sword principal totems from the Sky Sword sect's treasury. In addition to the 4 sword principal totems that Chu Fengmian already possessed, Chu Fengmian already had 7 sword principal totems in his hands. This was something that no force or expert had been able to do since the end of the Antiquity Age. Integrating the swordsmanship of a sword principal totem into the sword principal ancient book greatly improved Chu Fengmian's strength. This time, Chu Fengmian obtained 3 sword principal totems. If he could comprehend all the swordsmanship of these 3 sword principal totems and integrate them into the sword principal ancient book, Chu Fengmian's strength would be reborn again. His sword principle might also be further improved. I've already spent half an hour. There's only half an hour left. Chu Fengmian calculated the time and grabbed the 3 sword principal totems. In the treasure vault, except for the 3 sword principal totems, Chu Fengmian put all the other elixirs and herbs into his empty ring. Although Chu Fengmian wanted to comprehend the mystery of these 3 sword principal totems as soon as possible, he did not have the time to do so. The ancient white wolf incarnation could only last for half an hour at most. Chu Fengmian did not want to waste this time. His revenge on the 7 sects was not just to destroy the Tianjian sect. Let's go to the Sage Monarch sect. Chu Fengmian pondered for a moment and immediately chose his next target. The Sage Monarch sect. Chu Fengmian's next target was the Sage Monarch sect. It was for no other reason than the fact that Wu Yinling had ambushed him. Wu Yinling was one of the oldest patriarchs of the Sage Monarch sect. Since the Sage Monarch sect had already made their move, Chu Fengmian had no reason to let them off. Moreover, Wu Yinling's sneak attack on Chu Fengmian had failed, and she had been injured by Chu Fengmian instead. For a short period of time, Wu Yinling didn't dare to attack again. In other words, the Sage Monarch sect had lost a powerful ally. They were at their weakest, and it was time to strike while they were down. In an instant, Chu Fengmian walked out of the Spirit Chalcedony Palace. Glancing at the palace, Chu Fengmian unleashed the heaven-devouring secret technique and stored the entire Spirit Chalcedony Palace into his spatial ring. Rumble. The moment the Spirit Chalcedony Palace was uprooted by Chu Fengmian, the entire mountain peak lost its support and began to collapse. For a moment, the entire Tianjian sect was in ruins. The Tianjian sect disciples were fleeing in all directions. The Tianjian sect, the invincible overlord that had dominated the 9 regions for 10,000 years, was destroyed just like that. The Tianjian sect has been completely removed. From now on, the Tianjian sect will no longer exist in the 9 regions. Some martial artists muttered to themselves. To be able to witness the collapse of such a behemoth was extremely shocking for them. Who would have thought that the Tianjian sect would be destroyed in the hands of a junior? Is this person planning to leave? Where is he going? While everyone was still lamenting, someone suddenly looked in Chu Fengmian's direction. They found that Chu Fengmian had already torn open space and was preparing to leave the Tianjian sect. In an instant, Chu Fengmian tore open space and opened a space passage. He was the first to step into it, followed by Alcade Star Emperor and the ancient White Wolf. The 3 figures disappeared from the sky above the Tianjian sect. This is the direction of the Sage Monarch sect. Someone noticed the spatial fluctuations. They could clearly feel that the other end of the space passage was in the direction of the Sage Monarch sect. The Sage Monarch sect. Is this person planning to attack the Sage Monarch sect? This is too cruel. Is he planning to wipe out the 7 major sects? Many martial artists and monster deities were completely stunned. They had thought that Chu Fengmian would stop after destroying the Tianjian sect and sweeping away the countless treasures in the Tianjian sect. The treasures in the Tianjian sect's treasury were enough to increase Chu Fengmian's strength by a lot. They had thought that Chu Fengmian would stop, but they had not expected that Chu Fengmian would continue to attack the Sage Monarch sect. The destruction of the Tianjian sect was not the end, but the beginning. Let's go to the Sage Monarch sect. Let's go! For a moment, many experts near the Tianjian sect tore open space and flew in the direction of the Sage Monarch sect. The Tianjian sect has been destroyed. Chu Fengmian is going to attack the Sage Monarch sect? This news spread throughout the 9 regions in an instant. It could be said that many martial artists and monster deities had scoffed at the news of Chu Fengmian attacking the Tianjian sect. They thought that Chu Fengmian was just digging his own grave. But who would have thought that only half an hour had passed? The Tianjian sect had been destroyed. One of the 7 major sects, the overlord of the 9 zones for 10,000 years, had been destroyed by Chu Fengmian. This was simply beyond everyone's understanding. After this piece of news, there was an even more shocking piece of news. After destroying the Tianjian sect and looting the Tianjian sect's treasury, Chu Fengmian did not stop. Instead, he was going to attack the Sage Monarch sect. This meant that Chu Fengmian wanted to destroy the 7 major sects all by himself. The various forces in the 9 zones had heard about the grudges between the Sword sect and the 7 major sects. But even so, they thought that Chu Fengmian was crazy. Chu Fengmian was not enough. He wanted to continue attacking. Let's go to the Sage Monarch sect. The moment they heard the news, some of the patriarchs in seclusion in the 9 zones came out and flew in the direction of the Sage Monarch sect. They wanted to see the battle with their own eyes. They wanted to see what kind of person could destroy the Tianjian sect. This battle was the biggest battle since the siege of the Sword Dao sect 10,000 years ago. Almost all the martial artists and monster deities above the celestial realm in the 9 zones came to the Sage Monarch sect, waiting for the battle. The Sage Monarch sect. It was different from most other sects, which were built on top of mountains. The Sage Monarch sect was a city built on a vast plain. This city looked very ancient. The architectural style was completely different from that of the current era. Chapter 23:15. This city had a great history and was very famous in the 9 regions. Void Jade City. This is the legendary ancient city that has experienced the long river of time, Void Jade City. An elder said slowly as he looked at the city in the center of the plain. The huge city in the center of the plain was called Void Jade City. This city was not built by the sage monarch sect. According to legend, it was an ancient city that was obtained by one of the sage monarch sect's patriarchs. Void Jade City was built in the primordial era, so its architectural style was completely different from the cities in the 9 regions. During the primordial era, there were hundreds of tribes and countless big cities. However, when the primordial era was destroyed, so were these cities. However, Void Jade City was an exception. During the battle when the primordial era was destroyed, Void Jade City was somehow pulled into the depths of the void. It did not suffer the calamity of the primordial era and remained intact. After countless years, it suddenly appeared in the 9 regions. When Void Jade City appeared, it caused a competition among the 9 regions. In the end, Void Jade City fell into the hands of the Sage Monarch sect. Thus, the Sage Monarch sect was established in the Void Jade City. Void Jade City itself was not a precious object. Among the cities in the primordial era, Void Jade City was only a small success, and there were no profound array prohibitions carved on it. However, Void Jade City was in the depths of the void. After being tempered by the void turbulence, Void Jade City was extremely sturdy. Even celestial realm experts could not destroy the structure of Void Jade City. The entire Void Jade City could be said to be a natural protective array. Compared to the protective arrays of other sects, Void Jade City did not need to consume any resources. It was very convenient. The patriarch of the Sage Monarch sect saw this point and took action to seize Void Jade City and establish the Sage Monarch sect. The Tianjian sect's great array is vulnerable in front of Chufengmian. I wonder if Void Jade City can withstand it. An old man who had witnessed Chufengmian's attack on the Tianjian sect spoke slowly. The defense of Suyu City should be better than that of the Tianjian sect's mountain protection array. After all, this is a desolate ancient city. Another warrior said. Chufengmian, Alcade Star Emperor is here. While the crowd was still discussing. Not far from the sky above Void Jade City, the space was suddenly torn apart. As the space was torn apart, a spatial tunnel was formed. From within it, 3 figures slowly walked out. It was Chufengmian and the other 2. This is Chufengmian? It is said that he is the genius of the Sword Dao school from 10,000 years ago, the disciple of the Sword Dao master, Chu Jianbai. Numerous gazes fell on the young man leading the group. Compared to Alcade Star Emperor, the current Chufengmian was more eye-catching. Many of the cultivators present had witnessed the battle against the Heavenly Sword sect with their own eyes and recounted the details to them. In the attack on the Tianjian sect, Alcade Star Emperor and the Ancient White Wolf were at most assisting. The real attacker was still Chufengmian. It could be said that Chufengmian alone was enough to take 50% of the credit for the successful attack on the Tianjian sect. Many of the experts who had not seen Chufengmian's attack before were now constantly sizing him up. They could not understand how Chufengmian, who was only a half-step into the celestial realm, could have such heaven-defying strength. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would not have believed that a half-step celestial realm warrior could be so powerful. But just now, when Chufengmian attacked the Tianjian sect, more than tens of thousands of people had seen it. No one could doubt Chufengmian's strength. How can a person from 10,000 years ago be so young? The aura on his body does not seem like a person who has lived for 10,000 years. I don't know. Maybe it's caused by some secret technique. Chufengmian's identity in his previous life had long been known to the public. He was Chu Jianbai. This name was not unfamiliar to some of the old antiques. They had also heard that the Sword Principle sect had once given birth to an unparalleled genius in Sword Principle. However, Chu Jianbai was a cripple. Without spiritual power, he could not cultivate. No matter how strong his sword principle was, without the support of strength, he could not withstand a single blow. Devour. Therefore, for those old antiques, they had at most heard of this name, but did not know the specifics. This time, almost all the experts of the 9 regions have come. Chu Fengmian and the other 2 walked out of the space tunnel. Among them, Alcade Star Emperor looked around and couldn't help but ask. Even many old antiques who have been in seclusion have come out. It seems that they have all come for you, senior brother. This time, senior brother has pierced through the sky of the 9 regions. As Alcade Star Emperor spoke, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. She had been waiting for this moment to fight side by side with Chu Fengmian. Even if she faced the 7 major sects, she was not afraid at all. Immortal Marquis, Immortal King, and Peak Immortal King? It seems that the experts of the 9 regions are not as simple as they seem. Through these gazes, Chu Fengmian also saw many experts who were hiding not far away. Although many experts were trying their best to hide their aura, this kind of concealment was simply meaningless to Chu Fengmian. As long as they were martial artists and demon gods below the immortal monarch realm, they could not hide from Chu Fengmian's spiritual sense. Chu Fengmian's spiritual sense swept over and found that there were many Immortal Marquis, Immortal King, and even 2 Peak Immortal King experts. Void Jade City. Chu Fengmian slowly walked out of the spatial passageway. His gaze was fixed on the Void Jade City below. Even Chu Fengmian felt that this Void Jade City was incomparably magical. A city from the Desolation era was actually intact in the 9 regions. The coincidence made Chu Fengmian feel that it was incomparably mysterious. Even the former master of Sword Dao frequently marveled at it. The Lord of the Sword Dao had once come to Void Jade City and investigated it. In essence, Void Jade City was just an ordinary city. In the Desolation era, it was even unknown. However, when the Desolation era was destroyed, even the largest divine city in the Desolation era could not escape destruction. At most, some ruins were left behind. However, only Void Jade City managed to remain intact due to a fortuitous encounter. There was indeed something mysterious about this. But apart from that, there was nothing special about Void Jade City. It was just a slightly sturdy city. It was impossible for such a city to stop Chu Fengmian. Chapter 23:16. For the first time, Chu Fengmian saw the true appearance of the 9 regions. What Chu Fengmian had seen before was just the tip of the iceberg. Although these people don't belong to the 7 major sects, you have to be careful. Maybe some of them have been roped in by the 7 major sections. Alcade Star Emperor reminded from the side. For most of the martial artists and demon immortals, especially for these old antiques who had lived for tens of thousands of years, most of their relatives and friends had perished with the passage of time. They were the only ones left. For them, the only criterion for their actions was interest. As long as the 7 major sects were willing to pay the price, they might become enemies with Chu Fengmian even if they had no enmity with him. Chu Fengmian nodded when he heard this. He was also deeply aware of this point. The older the expert, the more indifferent their character was. Apart from strength and interest, there was nothing that could move them. They wouldn't hesitate to deal with someone who was completely unrelated to them, as long as the 7 major sects were willing to pay a sufficient price. Even if Chu Fengmian had no enmity with these people, he still had to be cautious. However, compared to these people, Chu Fengmian's biggest enemy was still the 7 major sections. Moreover, as long as Chu Fengmian showed great strength, even if the 7 major sects were willing to pay a huge price to rope them in, they might not become enemies with Chu Fengmian. No matter how many benefits there were, he had to be alive to enjoy them. Chu Fengmian just casually glanced at these people. His target was still the real target this time. Void Jade City. Chu Fengmian slowly walked out of the spatial passageway. His gaze was fixed on the Void Jade City below. Even Chu Fengmian felt that this Void Jade City was incomparably magical. A city from the Desolation era was actually intact in the 9 regions. Even Chu Fengmian felt that the coincidences were incomparably mysterious. Even the former master of the Sword Dao was amazed by it. The Sword Dao master had once come to Void Jade City and investigated it. Void Jade City was, in essence, just an ordinary city. In the Desolate Ancient Era, it was unknown. However, when the Desolate Ancient Era was destroyed, even the largest divine city of the Desolate Ancient Era could not escape destruction. At most, it would leave behind some ruins. However, only Void Jade City managed to remain intact due to a fortuitous encounter. There was indeed something mysterious about this. However, apart from that, there was nothing special about the Void Jade City. It was merely a slightly sturdy city. It was impossible for such a city to stop Chu Fengmian. Back in Suyu City, the Sage Ruler sect was already prepared for battle. Chu Fengmian's every move during his attack on the Tianjian sect had been completely monitored by them. When they saw that Chu Fengmian had rushed over to the Sage Monarch sect, the Sage Monarch sect's grand formation in the Void Jade City had already been fully activated and was fully prepared. At this moment, the great array that had risen above the Void Jade City was ready. 7-colored light was circulating within the array. Anyone who dared to approach the array would be killed on the spot by the power of the 7-colored light. Chu Fengmian, who was standing in the air, looked at the great array with a calm expression. It was as if this great array was not worthy of Chu Fengmian's attention. He only took a glance at it before suddenly taking a step forward. It seemed like a single step, but it contained the Space Dao. With a single step, Chu Fengmian's figure appeared in the center of the great array. Rumble! Bursts of 7-colored light suddenly condensed into a ray of light that contained monstrous power. It swept across the heavens and the earth and bombarded Chu Fengmian with a loud bang. Vaguely, behind the great array, one could clearly see the figures standing in the Void Jade City. These people were extremely tall, and behind each of them, there was a burst of 7-colored light. The grand formation in the sky above Void Jade City was supported by their power. The Sage Monarch sect's experts have made their move. All of their power has gathered into the array. They want to kill this person in one blow. Someone murmured when he saw this scene. So what if they join forces? When it comes to the array Dao, the Sage Monarch sect is far inferior to the Tianjian sect. Do you think this array can resist me? Chu Fengmian's expression relaxed to the extreme when he saw the gathering 7-colored light. He let out a cold shout and opened his mouth. 2 spiritual swords suddenly appeared in Chu Fengmian's hands. The 2 swords struck out together. Time was running out, and Chu Fengmian did not want to waste any more time. Sky-splitting. The 2 swords merged. The ancient book of Sword Dao appeared above Chu Fengmian's head. Suddenly, endless sword essence condensed in the blade and suddenly burst out with this sword. Boom! Boom! The power of this sword had the power to split the heavens and earth. Nothing could resist the sharpness of this sword. Even the 7-colored divine light, which was formed by the combined efforts of countless top powers from the Sage Monarch sect, slowly dissipated under the might of the sword. Only a crack sound could be heard. Countless cracks suddenly appeared in the huge array above the Void Jade City. Break! Chu Fengmian shouted. When his sword collided with the 7-colored divine light, 6 claws of the war dragon appeared above Chu Fengmian's head and swept across. Boom! The 6 claws of the war dragon fiercely bombarded. Under the endless dragon power, even the experts of the celestial realm were like ants. They could not resist. The huge array was already full of cracks. Under the bombardment of the 6 claws of the war dragon, it immediately shattered and exploded. For a moment, everyone could see that there were many tall figures in the Void Jade City that were retreating along with the destruction of the array. Some people even spat out mouthfuls of blood as if they had been struck by lightning. The great array above the Void Jade City was easily destroyed by a single move. One move. Chu Fengmian only struck out with his sword. One move. Seeing this scene, the martial artists and demon gods who were watching from afar were shocked to the extreme. With just one move, the protective mountain array of the Sage Monarch sect had been destroyed. Although the Sage Monarch sect was a body cultivator sect, their attainments in array formation were still inferior to the Tianjian sect and the Desolate Ancient sect. However, the only difference was that they were inferior to the forces of the 7 major sects. Compared to most of the sects of the 9 regions, or even the forces of the extraterritorial starry sky, the protective mountain array above the Void Jade City was extremely mysterious. Anyone who tried to break the array would be courting death. Chapter 23:17. Even the 2 peak stage immortal kings who were hiding among these people were shocked when they saw this scene. They had never seen Chu Fengmian make a move with their own eyes. It was only when they heard the news that Chu Fengmian attacked the Tianjian sect and destroyed the Tianjian sect that they came out of seclusion to take a look. In their hearts, they didn't think that Chu Fengmian was as exaggerated as the rumors said. But today, they saw that Chu Fengmian was more than what the rumors said. The strength he showed was even more powerful than the rumors said. Although the mountain protecting array above Void Jade City wasn't a mysterious array, it could be said that it was formed by the strength of the experts in the Sage Monarch sect. Even a peak stage immortal king expert couldn't break it in a short time. If the 2 of them attacked, they might not be able to break the array in an hour. However, at that moment, Chu Fengmian had destroyed the grand formation with a single move. This level of strength was on a completely different level compared to the 2 of them. The 2 peak stage immortal kings couldn't help but look at each other. The 2 of them came out of seclusion not just to watch the show. Their lifespans were almost exhausted, and only by advancing their cultivation realm could they restore their lifespans. Looking for an opportunity to break through was the most important thing for them. This time, the 2 of them came out of seclusion because they were recruited by the 7 major sections. They wanted the 2 of them to help the 7 major sects deal with Chu Fengmian. The 2 of them had been hiding in the void and didn't show up. They were also looking for an opportunity to attack and kill Chu Fengmian. But they didn't expect that Chu Fengmian's strength would be completely beyond their imagination. This strength was no longer at the peak of the Immortal King realm, but at a higher level, the Immortal Monarch realm. Although there was only a difference of 1 word between the Immortal King realm and the Immortal Monarch realm, the difference in strength was also a huge divide. Many geniuses reached the peak of the Immortal King realm in their lifetime, but there were very few who wanted to go further and truly step into the Immortal Monarch realm. Raging Flame Sword Emperor, Gongyang Xian, and even Wu Yinling, which one of them wasn't the most monstrous genius of their generation, but in the end, they were all trapped in the peak of the Immortal King realm, unable to go further. It was the same for the 2 peak Immortal Kings. This huge gap was simply impossible to break through. Even 10 peak stage Immortal Kings might not be a match for 1 Immortal Monarch. They originally thought that Chu Fengmian's strength was only at the pinnacle of the Immortal King realm. In that case, it would be a piece of cake for the experts of the 7 major sects and the 2 of them to kill Chu Fengmian. But Chu Fengmian's 1 move to break the formation was completely beyond their expectations. For a moment, the 2 of them looked hesitant. They looked at each other, and through their spiritual senses, they seemed to be discussing something. On the other side, Chu Fengmian didn't know that his attack this time had actually intimidated the 2 peak Immortal Kings. However, this time, Chu Fengmian had chosen to use his full strength to break the formation in 1 move. He had indeed wanted to intimidate the others. Chu Fengmian had too many secrets. It could be said that any martialist or demon celestial in the 9 regions would want to obtain the opportunities that Chu Fengmian possessed. But now, they didn't dare to fight against Chu Fengmian because of Chu Fengmian's strength. Fighting against Chu Fengmian was tantamount to a dead end. The strength that Chu Fengmian had displayed had completely suppressed the thoughts in their minds. But if Chu Fengmian's performance was weak, these thoughts would appear in their minds again. When that time came, it would be difficult for Chu Fengmian to deal with them. This time, he had made a move with the intention of intimidating the others. Looking at the shocked expressions of the surrounding people, Chu Fengmian smiled in his heart. His plan had succeeded. The formation was broken. The appearance of Void Jade City also appeared in front of everyone. This Void Jade City wasn't like the current cities, which were full of palaces. Instead, it was extremely simple and crude. Among them, there were only stone houses. They seemed to have been piled up in an extremely simple manner. They appeared to be in a disorderly manner, and there was not a single formation carved on them. However, although there was no formation engraved on them, the stone houses in Void Jade City were much stronger than those palaces that were engraved with many formations. Chu Fengmian had destroyed the formation, and the remaining aftermath had the strength of a celestial realm expert. An ordinary formation wouldn't be able to withstand it. But now, in the entire Void Jade City, not a single stone house was damaged. Chu Fengmian's strength bombarded the stone houses, but it couldn't shake them at all. This was the strength of Void Jade City. Every stone house was extremely sturdy. The experts of Sage King's sect were all hiding in the stone houses. When Chu Fengmian broke the formation, they didn't feel any impact. Now, they all walked out of the stone houses. Only some of the experts of Sage King's sect who were responsible for maintaining the formation looked pale. Just now, when Chu Fengmian broke the formation, the power of the backlash had also seriously injured them. Suddenly, numerous cracks appeared on the huge formation above Void Jade City. "Break!" Chu Fengmian shouted. When his sword collided with the seven-colored divine light, 6 claws of the war dragon condensed above Chu Fengmian's head and swept across. Boom! The 6 claws of the war dragon fiercely bombarded. Under the endless dragon power, even a celestial realm expert was like an ant and couldn't resist. This huge formation was already full of cracks. Under the bombardment of the 6 claws of the war dragon, it immediately shattered and exploded. For a moment, everyone could see that there were many tall figures in the Void Jade City that were retreating along with the destruction of the array. Some people even spat out a mouthful of blood as if they were struck by lightning. The great array above the Void Jade City was easily destroyed by a single move. One move. Chu Fengmian only used his sword. One move. Seeing this scene, the martial artists and demon gods who were watching from afar were shocked to the extreme. With just one move, the protective mountain array of the Sage Monarch sect had been destroyed. Although Sage King's sect was a body cultivator's sect, its attainments in the art of formation were inferior to the Tianjian sect and the Desolate Ancient sect. But the only difference was that it was inferior to the forces of the 7 major sects. Compared to most of the 9 region sects and even the various forces in the extraterritorial starry sky, the protective mountain formation above Void Jade City was extremely mysterious. Anyone who tried to break the formation would be courting death. Chapter 23:18. Chu Fengmian's tone was as though immortal kings were nothing more than ants in his eyes. What an arrogant kid! Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, many of the Sage Ruler's sect experts in Void Jade City were enraged. Many of them were famous experts even in the 9 regions. They had never been looked down upon like this before. Many people's auras suddenly burst out. Sage Ruler Limitless. Among them, 3 immortal kings and the supreme elders of the Sage Ruler sect suddenly attacked. Their bodies suddenly became incomparably tall as 3 or 4 people. Their bodies showed a glassy color, and a burst of power burst out. For a moment, their power was pushed to the extreme. The 3 of them joined forces and rushed towards Chu Fengmian. The power that erupted from their joint attack turned into a 7-colored divine light that swept everything in its path. Wu Feng, Wu Jia, just you bunch of useless old men, you dare to oppose me? Battle Dragon Claw, tear. Chu Fengmian burst into laughter when he saw the rainbow-colored divine light bombarding him. He stood there without moving an inch. Suddenly, a huge dragon claw condensed above Chu Fengmian's head. The power of this dragon claw was like the birth of the real ancestor Jianwang. Rolling dragon power shrouded the heads of everyone present. In Suyu City, many of the weaker disciples below the celestial realm of the Sage King's sect were unable to move under the suppression of the dragon's might. They were completely suppressed. Chu Fengmian was now in control of the dragon origin. As he became stronger, the Dragon Clan martial techniques he displayed became more mysterious. It could be said that compared to the real ancestor Jianwang, Chu Fengmian only lacked power. When Chu Fengmian's power reached the same level as the ancestor Jianwang, the Dragon Clan's martial skill that Chu Fengmian had used was no different from the one that the ancestor Heavenly Dragon had used. The Dragon Claw bombarded downwards, tearing everything apart. The seven-colored divine radiance that the three supreme elders of the Sage Monarch sect had unleashed was instantly torn apart. After tearing apart the seven-colored divine light, the power of the battle Dragon Claw did not diminish at all. It immediately blasted towards the three supreme elders of the Sage Ruler sect. Bang! 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 Countless sounds rang out. The defenses of the three supreme elders of the Sage Ruler sect were mercilessly shattered. Their bodies bore the brunt of the War Dragon Claw's power, and cracks started to appear on their glass-like bodies. The power of Chu Fengmian's move had mercilessly shattered the three supreme elders' bodies, which were their strongest points of strength. Their bodies. And they were sent tumbling into the distance. The three supreme elders glanced over and saw that their bodies were on the verge of shattering. Their faces were incomparably pale, indicating that they were severely injured. The most powerful thing about the Sage King sect was their physical bodies. If their physical bodies were damaged, it would take a few years for them to recover. The three Celestial King Realm Supreme Elders of the Sage King sect attacked Chu Fengmian at the same time. However, Chu Fengmian's battle Dragon Claw sent them flying and severely injured them. Even if the three Immortal Kings joined forces, they could not defeat Chu Fengmian. When they first attacked the Tianjian sect, the three Immortal Kings joined forces, which was enough to cause a lot of trouble for Chu Fengmian. However, Chu Fengmian's immortal real body had advanced to the 4th level. He killed Gong Yangxian, seized the three immortal artifacts, and integrated the flag into his immortal real body. After condensing the three inscriptions, his strength had increased to an incredible level. The power of the third inscription was far greater than the previous two inscriptions. With his current strength, Chu Fengmian could defeat or even kill a peak Immortal King. In front of Chu Fengmian, Immortal Kings were not even qualified to make a move. Chu Fengmian looked at the three Supreme Elders of the Sage Ruler sect who had just attacked. His eyes were cold and contained a bit of killing intent. These three people had participated in the battle to kill the Master of the Sword Principle 10,000 years ago. They had attacked the Sword Principle sect. None of these people should even think about leaving alive today. Suddenly, Chu Fengmian took a step forward, held two swords in his hands, and suddenly attacked. The dazzling sword light was aimed at the three people who had just attacked. Presumptuous. Just as Chu Fengmian was about to unleash his sword attack, a thunderous voice resonated in the air. Immediately after, a silhouette appeared in the Void Jade City. That silhouette faced Chu Fengmian's sword attack head-on and suddenly threw out a punch. The moment this punch burst out, it was like a martial god had descended to the world. The power of this punch could swallow mountains and rivers, and the power of one hand could cover the sky. The fist wind bombarded on Chu Fengmian's sword light. Rumble! Chu Fengmian's punch landed on the sword light, and the sword light was directly shattered. At the same time, this figure suddenly waved his hand, and a seven-colored light swept out, completely blocking the aftermath of the sword light. The might of the sword gleam was easily blocked by the figure. He blocked this person's sword? Who is it? Seeing that someone had blocked Chu Fengmian's sword light, many martial artists and demon gods could not help but exclaim. They had seen Chu Fengmian's strength with their own eyes. Even the supreme elders of the 7 major sects could not withstand a single blow from Chu Fengmian. Now, this figure had easily blocked Chu Fengmian's sword light. This kind of strength was much stronger than Wu Feng and the others who had just attacked. Many people hurriedly looked over and saw that the person who had attacked was a middle-aged man. He stood there, motionless, and exuded a supreme aura. It's Emperor Wu. Emperor Wu of the Sage Ruler sect. Some of the old antiques of the 9 regions recognized this middle-aged man. the old sect leader of the Sage Rulers sect was also the strongest person in the Sage Rulers sect, Emperor Wu. This person's martial Dao had reached an unimaginable level. In terms of martial Dao comprehension, no one in the entire 9 regions could compare with him. This person called himself the Martial Emperor. Emperor Wu, I thought you had run away and hidden. Chu Fengmian looked at Emperor Wu, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Chu Jianbai, how dare you attack my Sage Ruler sect? You are courting death. Emperor Wu stared at Chu Fengmian, and his tone was extremely cold. He was very clear about Chu Fengmian's identity. He had not expected that Chu Fengmian, who was just a little guy 10,000 years ago, would cause such a storm today. However, he did not need to think so much today. His goal was to stop Chu Fengmian. He could not let Chu Fengmian destroy the Sage Rulers sect like he had destroyed the Tianjin sect. Chapter 23:19. Emperor Wu, do you think you can stop me by yourself? Chu Fengmian sneered when he saw the martial emperor's figure. His invincible strength was on par with Gong Yangshuan's. The Sage Monarch sect originally had Emperor Wu and Wu Yinling, 2 peak immortal kings. However, Wu Yinling had just launched a sneak attack on Chu Fengmian and was severely injured by him. Now that there was only Emperor Wu left, what could he do? What if I join in? Just as Chu Fengmian spoke, a skinny old man suddenly walked out of the surrounding space slowly and stood beside Emperor Wu. This skinny old man came to Emperor Wu's side almost silently. His sudden appearance shocked everyone. Even many of the immortal marquis and immortal kings present were shocked for a moment. Even they did not detect the aura of this skinny old man at all. It was as if he had appeared out of thin air. Wu Yinling, you still dare to appear? Alcade Star Emperor, who was beside Chu Fengmian, shouted coldly with killing intent in his eyes when he saw this skinny old man. This skinny old man was Wu Yinling, who had launched a sneak attack on Chu Fengmian. Previously, he was chased by Chu Fengmian and escaped with serious injuries. He thought that he would find a place to recuperate. He did not expect Wu Yinling to appear so soon. Moreover, Wu Yinling did not seem to have any injuries on his body. His aura had completely recovered to its peak. In such a short time, Wu Yinling's injuries had actually recovered just like that. His injuries have healed so quickly. It seems that the old man from Medicine King Valley has made a move. Chu Fengmian glanced at Wu Yinling and guessed that Wu Yinling's injuries had healed so quickly. Wu Yinling didn't cultivate body arts. Although Chu Fengmian had only attacked once, it was enough to seriously injure Wu Yinling. She wouldn't be able to recover from such an injury without several years of rest. But now, Wu Yinling had completely recovered. In such a short period of time, the only person in the 9 zones who could do this was the old man from the Valley of the Medicine Masters, the Medicine Master, who had lived for almost 100,000 years. The Medicine Master's medical skills were at the peak of the 9 regions, and no one had ever been able to challenge him. Wu Yinling's injuries could only be treated by the Medicine Master himself. The Medicine Master had lived for nearly 100,000 years. Even with his amazing medical skills, he was nearing the end of his lifespan. He had been cultivating in seclusion all this time. He didn't even take part in the battle against the Sword Dao sect 10,000 years ago. Unexpectedly, this time, it was because Chu Fengmian had come out of seclusion. But in the blink of an eye, Chu Fengmian also understood the knack of it. The 7 great sects were the ones who took the initiative to attack the Sword Dao sect. There wasn't much risk to the 7 great sections. But this time, everyone knew that Chu Fengmian wanted to completely destroy the 7 great sections. From the destruction of the Tianjin sect, it was enough to imagine all of this. For the Valley of the Medicine Masters, this was a matter of life and death, so much so that the Valley of the Medicine Masters had invited the Medicine Master out. Since the Medicine Master has come out of seclusion, please show yourself. Chu Fengmian glanced at Emperor Wu and Wu Yinling, and his gaze fell on a position beside them. Chu Fengmian controlled the way of space, so he could clearly sense that there was another aura beside Emperor Wu and Wu Yinling. The strength of this aura was not below that of Emperor Wu and Wu Yinling. It should be the medicine master of the Valley of the Medicine Masters. The younger generation will surpass us in time. Just in the direction that Chu Fengmian was looking at, a figure slowly emerged from the space. It was a white-haired old man with an old-fashioned face. Although he was old, his eyes were full of spirit as he looked at Chu Fengmian. The moment the medicine master appeared, he looked Chu Fengmian up and down. His eyes were deep, as if he could see the mystery of Chu Fengmian's body at a glance. After a few glances, the medicine master retracted his gaze and slowly spoke. Demon. Although it was only 2 words, the shock that flashed in the medicine master's eyes could not be hidden from anyone. Even the medicine master, who had lived for almost 100,000 years, had never seen someone like Chu Fengmian. He had heard some rumors about Chu Fengmian before, but he still had some doubts in his heart, thinking that Chu Fengmian was hiding his cultivation level. Otherwise, a warrior who was half a step into the celestial realm could not be so powerful. Seeing it with his own eyes today, he was sure that Chu Fengmian was indeed half a step into the celestial realm, but Chu Fengmian's strength had reached an unimaginable level. Even with his peak immortal king realm, he could feel that his strength did not have the slightest advantage against Chu Fengmian. No wonder you are so confident. It turns out that you have invited the help of the medicine master. Chu Fengmian glanced at Emperor Wu and said. His tone was so indifferent that no one could understand Chu Fengmian's attitude. Brat, you injured me last time. I still remember this grudge. Wu Yinling stared at Chu Fengmian and said coldly. There was a hint of viciousness in his small eyes. Wu Yinling was a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. In his life, when he attacked, he had always failed, but it was enough to retreat unscathed. However, last time, he suffered such a big loss at the hands of Chu Fengmian. He still remembered this grudge. You are just a loser. Chu Fengmian listened to Wu Yinling's words and said with a hint of disdain at the corner of his mouth. I didn't kill you last time and let you escape. This time, your appearance saves me from finding trouble with you in the future. Chu Fengmian said, not taking Wu Yinling seriously at all. Damn boy, Wu Yinling's face showed some anger. Just as he was about to speak, he saw that after Chu Fengmian finished speaking, he had no intention of looking at him at all and completely ignored him. This Wu Yinling was just a loser. He almost succeeded the first time because Chu Fengmian was caught off guard. Now that Chu Fengmian was on guard, Wu Yinling was no longer a threat. His gaze slowly landed on the medicine master as he spoke. Medicine master, you have never cared about worldly affairs. You only seek to cultivate alchemy. Why did you intervene this time? Chu Fengmian didn't have much malice towards the medicine master. 10,000 years ago, the medicine master didn't participate in the besieging of the Sword Dao sect. In Chu Fengmian's heart, Wu Yinling, Emperor Wu, and the others were already people who must be killed. However, Chu Fengmian didn't have any intention of becoming enemies with the medicine master. We are just taking what we need. Hearing Chu Fengmian's question, the medicine master didn't hide the reason. With his status, there was indeed nothing for him to hide. Chapter 2320. I'm only interested in the Tao of Medicine of the Shang Sword Sect. If you hand over the Tao of Medicine of the Shang Sword Sect and the secret of your sudden increase in strength, I won't participate in this battle. The medicine master replied calmly. The Tao of Medicine of the Shang Sword Sect and the secret of his sudden increase in strength. Chu Fengmian had already guessed the medicine master's conditions. The medicine master focused his life on the Tao of Medicine. His Tao of Medicine was the best in the 9 regions. With his status, the biggest reason why he helped the Sage Monarch sect was because of the Tao of Medicine of the Shang Sword sect. Although the Shang Sword sect was a sword sect, the Pill Hall was also famous in history. The Shang Sword sect was a colossus that once ruled the 9 regions. The Pill Hall's inheritance alone was stronger than many famous Tao of Medicine sects in the 9 regions. Chu Fengmian wasn't surprised that the medicine master wanted to learn the Tao of Medicine of the Shang Sword sect. Moreover, Chu Fengmian might agree to this condition. After all, the pill hall's inheritance left behind countless pill recipes. Now that Chu Fengmian had obtained them, it wasn't impossible for Chu Fengmian to exchange some of the pill recipes for the medicine master's support. However, the medicine master's appetite was much bigger than Chu Fengmian expected. He actually wanted the secret of Chu Fengmian's sudden increase in strength. Chu Fengmian was only a half-step celestial being, but he had the strength of a peak immortal king, or even a monarch immortal. There must be a big secret behind this. Chu Fengmian had obtained countless opportunities, but his strength mainly depended on three things to reach his current strength: the ancient book of Sword Tao, the immortal true body, and the power of the three innate divine beasts. These three opportunities were the foundation of Chu Fengmian's strength. However, Chu Fengmian couldn't hand over any of them. The medicine master's condition had already touched Chu Fengmian's bottom line. "I can't agree to this condition." Chu Fengmian looked at the medicine master, and his tone became colder. "Is that so? If you don't agree, then I'll take it myself." The medicine master heard Chu Fengmian's words and laughed loudly. His eyes were cold. His life was coming to an end, and he had to use all means to restore his life. Whether it was the sword sex Tao of medicine or the secret of Chu Fengmian, they were all extremely attractive to him. This was the reason why he was willing to help the sage monarch sect. It didn't matter to him whether Chu Fengmian agreed or not. As long as he could kill Chu Fengmian, everything would belong to him. If that's the case, then there's nothing more to say. Chu Fengmian looked at Emperor Wu Yinling, and the herb master as he spoke casually. "Since you've chosen to be my enemy, today is the day you die. Wang." The moment Chu Fengmian spoke, both swords struck out. The ferocious sword swept everything in its path, heading straight for the herb master and Emperor Wu. Chu Fengmian didn't hide his strength in this attack. The shadows of the three connate sacred beasts suddenly condensed behind Chu Fengmian's back and bolstered his body. At the same time, the power of the ancient swordsmanship book burst out from Chu Fengmian's body. The power of countless swordsmanship recorded in it was added to Chu Fengmian's two swords. The moment Chu Fengmian struck out with his swords, he instantly struck out dozens of swordsmanship. Each of these swordsmanship was an immortal skill. Chu Fengmian had integrated countless swordsmanship from the Shang Sword Sex Library into the ancient swordsmanship book. Every time he used it, he could master it easily. Moreover, Chu Fengmian had the support of the Holy Pulse. His strength was almost limitless. If it were other warriors, they wouldn't dare to use their full strength like Chu Fengmian. After all, no matter how strong a warrior was, if he kept using his full strength, there would be a time when his strength would be exhausted. However, Chu Fengmian had the support of the Holy Pulse. His strength was almost limitless. Below him was the Sage Monarch sect. The countless spiritual springs in it were the best place for Chu Fengmian's Holy Pulse to absorb power. Therefore, when Chu Fengmian struck, he used his full strength without any scruples. Dozens of swordsmanship at the immortal skill level were struck out at the same time. It was earth-shattering, shocking everyone. Many warriors in the Sage Monarch sect below were swept into the swordsmanship and died on the spot. For a moment, Siyu City was drenched in blood. Supreme Martial Artist. The martial emperor's body became bigger and bigger as he faced the countless swords that were slashing towards him. His martial Tao was fully unleashed as he displayed his ultimate skill, the purest form of martial Tao. His fist turned into a gust of wind and swept across the area. 10 million strikes. The gust of fist wind bombarded down. There were more than 10 million of them. They collided repeatedly with Chu Fengmian's swordsmanship. For a moment, all of them were blocked. At the same time, the medicine master beside him also attacked. A medicine cauldron suddenly appeared in his palm and bombarded Chu Fengmian. The medicine master attacked without any fanciful moves. He had been studying medicine all his life. Of course, his understanding of martial path was far inferior to Emperor Wu and Chu Fengmian. However, his strength was more vigorous than Emperor Wu's. If one were to ask who was the strongest in the 9 zones, the medicine master could be said to be number 1. The medicine master had refined countless immortal elixirs. Among them, the medicine master had taken the strongest ones himself. Although the medicine master was not as good as Emperor Wu in martial path, his true strength might be above Emperor Wu's. Moreover, the medicine cauldron was an immoral artifact. With the medicine master's activation, it immediately bombarded Chu Fengmian. This medicine cauldron was made of bronze. There were some golden inscriptions carved into it. These golden inscriptions were extremely ancient. It was obviously an extremely ancient immoral artifact. Is this the Medicine King's limitless cauldron? A warrior couldn't help but ask. Among the 100 cauldrons of the world, the medicine cauldron ranked 11th was called the Medicine King's limitless cauldron. It was also the most famous medicine cauldron in the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Almost all the warriors in the 9 zones knew that this medicine cauldron in the Valley of the Medicine Masters was the Valley of the Medicine Masters. No, this isn't the Medicine King's limitless cauldron. This isn't the Medicine King's limitless cauldron? What kind of medicine cauldron is this? Or is it an immoral artifact medicine cauldron? When the surrounding warriors saw the medicine cauldron appear and took a closer look, they were shocked. Many of them had seen the medicine master's limitless cauldron before. Everyone had thought that the medicine master had taken out the medicine master's limitless cauldron. However, the medicine cauldron now looked very different from the medicine master's limitless cauldron. There's actually a medicine cauldron hidden in the Valley of the Medicine Masters? And it's an immoral artifact medicine cauldron? Chu Fengmian had seen the medicine master's limitless cauldron before. However, the medicine master had not taken out the medicine master's limitless cauldron. It was another one of the 100 cauldrons of the world. Chu Fengmian had once obtained one of the 100 cauldrons of the world. It was the Divine 9 Dragon Cauldron, which was ranked 9th. However, the medicine master had taken out a medicine cauldron of a higher quality than the Divine 9 Dragon Cauldron. Chapter 23-21. Golden Patterned in Bronze. This is the Golden Patterned Great Way Cauldron, ranked 8th among the 100 cauldrons of the world. Chu Fengmian recognized the origin of the cauldron with a glance. The Golden Patterned Great Way Cauldron ranked 8th among the 100 cauldrons of the world looked exactly like the cauldron in front of him. According to the ancient records, the Golden Patterned Great Way Cauldron hadn't appeared in the 9 regions for hundreds of thousands of years. He didn't expect it to be in the hands of the medicine master. The quality of the Golden Patterned Great Way Cauldron surpassed the Divine 9 Dragon's Cauldron in terms of quality. Even among immoral artifacts, it was a top-grade one. Among the 100 cauldrons of the world, the first 7 were all immoral artifacts of the extreme path. The records of these 7 cauldrons were extremely vague in the ancient records. There were only names, but no records of their appearances. Therefore, many people in the 9 regions doubted whether these 7 cauldrons really existed. The Golden Patterned Great Way Cauldron was the #1 cauldron recorded in the ancient records. Today, it had been obtained by the medicine master. The Golden Patterned Great Way Cauldron was said to be a cauldron of the Great Way Cauldron that was enveloped in a portion of the power of heaven and earth when it was refined. The moment the Golden Patterned Great Way Cauldron blasted toward Chu Fengmian, he instantly felt the power of heaven and earth descend and suppress his body. However, the power of heaven and earth contained in this cauldron couldn't withstand a single blow from Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian had already passed the heaven-defying tribulation and become a variant of heaven and earth. He didn't fear the true heavenly way, let alone a portion of the power of heaven and earth. Break for me. Chu Fengmian stood in the air, his sword while soaring into the sky. The suppression of the power of heaven and earth around Chu Fengmian instantly broke through. At the same time, facing the Golden Patterned Great Way Cauldron's suppression, Chu Fengmian drew his sword at the same time. The 2 swords turned into a 10,000-foot-long sword light that bombarded the Golden Patterned Great Way Cauldron. Boom! With an explosion of immoral power, the Golden Patterned Great Way Cauldron was sent flying. The bombardment of the Golden Patterned Cauldron was easily neutralized by Chu Fengmian's sword. At the same time, waves of sword edges were also aimed at the medicine master. In an instant, the defensive barrier that the medicine master had condensed around him was shattered. At the same time, on the other side, countless dragon claws appeared above Chu Fengmian's head in the face of Emperor Wu's countless fist winds. The dragon claws slammed down and collided with the fist winds. 1 against 2, Chu Fengmian didn't back down at all. Humph. Just as Chu Fengmian was exchanging blows with Emperor Wu and the medicine master, Wu Yinling's face revealed a sinister expression. Suddenly, her figure flashed as she wanted to attack. However, in the instant that his figure flashed, a starry sword light suddenly slashed down. It was Alcade Star Emperor. Wu Yinling's ability to fight head-on was not good, but once he launched a sneak attack, he was also an incomparably troublesome enemy. Therefore, from the very beginning, Chu Fengmian had planned to deal with the herb master himself, the Emperor Wu. As for Wu Yinling, he would leave her to Alcade Star Emperor. This time, Chu Fengmian didn't attack the Sage Monarch sect alone. He had the help of Alcade Star Emperor and the Ancient White Wolf. Chu Fengmian didn't plan to let the Ancient White Wolf take action. First, every time the Ancient White Wolf attacked, it would consume a lot of energy. If it went all out, this incarnation wouldn't last long. Chu Fengmian still needed the Ancient White Wolf to intimidate everyone. Second, Chu Fengmian was also worried that there would be others who would take the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Among the 7 major sects, the experts of the 6 demonic sects, Ancient Moon Valley, and Desolate Ancient Sect hadn't appeared yet. Chu Fengmian wasn't sure if they would suddenly launch a sneak attack. The Ancient White Wolf could protect Chu Fengmian from behind. Moreover, not only the 7 major sects, but the other experts of the 9 regions also wanted to launch a sneak attack on Chu Fengmian in order to gain some benefits from him. The Ancient White Wolf didn't need to attack. It just stood there as a deterrent. For Chu Fengmian, he wasn't afraid to fight 2 against 1. His strength was no longer what it used to be. Alcade Star Emperor was already fighting with Wu Yinling. Countless forces were clashing on the side. On the other side. Purple Crystal. Yin Yang. After Chu Fengmian sent the Great Tao Cauldron flying, he moved and immediately flew towards the Medicine Master. He suddenly attacked with the Purple Crystal Sword technique and the Yin Yang Sword technique. These 2 sword techniques were almost comparable to the Immortal Emperor sword techniques. They slashed out at the Medicine Master at the same time. The person Chu Fengmian wanted to kill first was the Medicine Master. Compared to Emperor Wu, the Medicine Master's martial comprehension was much worse. Facing the 2 of them, Chu Fengmian naturally wanted to defeat them one by one. Although the Medicine Master was stronger, his martial comprehension was extremely poor. The person Chu Fengmian wanted to kill first was naturally him. Boom! The power of the 2 swords erupted at the same time. The power of the 2 sword principles shattered all the barriers that the Medicine Master had formed around him. Seeing Chu Fengmian's sudden arrival, the Medicine Master's face showed some panic. The Medicine Master comprehended the way of medicine. Other than when he was young, he rarely fought. Although he was strong, he had not experienced many battles of life and death. Much of his strength had been raised by elixirs. With the Medicine Master's way of medicine, he could even remove the impurities in the elixirs. However, in terms of fighting experience, the Medicine Master, who had not experienced many battles of life and death, was far from comparable to Chu Fengmian, who had fought his way to his current strength. Chu Fengmian had only been reborn for a few years, but he had experienced more battles of life and death than Emperor Wu and the others. The 7 major sects were Chu Fengmian's enemies. In the 9 regions, it could be said that they were enemies of the entire world. In terms of battle experience, the 2 of them were far from being on the same level. Seeing Chu Fengmian approach, the Medicine Master's face changed. He picked up the Great Tao Cauldron again and slammed it towards Chu Fengmian. However, at this moment, Chu Fengmian's figure suddenly flashed. He took a step to the side and dodged the attack of the Great Tao Cauldron. Chu Fengmian immediately arrived beside the Medicine Master and slashed out with his sword. Boom! When the sword slashed the Medicine Master's body, a jade talisman suddenly appeared above the Medicine Master's head and blocked the power of the sword. However, after withstanding the power of the sword, the Jade Talisman also shattered. Seeing the Jade Talisman shatter, the medicine master's face turned incomparably pale. He had paid a great price to find this Jade Talisman. It was a Jade Talisman left behind by an immortal lord expert. It could withstand several attacks from a peak immortal king expert. However, this time, it was shattered by Chu Fengmian's attack. If it was not for this Jade Talisman, he would have died under Chu Fengmian's sword. Chapter 23-22. The medicine master's face was extremely pale. He looked at Chu Fengmian with fear in his eyes. He was willing to cooperate with the Sage Monarch sect to deal with Chu Fengmian in order to obtain the Tao of Medicine of the Shang Sword sect and the secrets of Chu Fengmian to break through and increase his lifespan. He didn't want to die like this. But this time, when he fought with Chu Fengmian, even his last trump card, the protective Jade Talisman, was shattered by Chu Fengmian's sword. He only had one protective Jade Talisman. If Chu Fengmian attacked again, he would definitely die. After a brief hesitation, the medicine master suddenly turned into a ray of light and fled into the distance. The medicine master chose to flee. Chu Fengmian didn't expect this. Normally, martial artists would only choose to run away when they were seriously injured or when they knew that they were no match for their opponent. This was the first time Chu Fengmian had seen a peak immortal king martial artist like the herb master, who was completely unscathed and had only been threatened a little before escaping. Ordinary peak immortal king powerhouses had stepped on countless corpses to obtain their current strength. Naturally, they weren't afraid of a life-and-death battle. But the medicine master was an exception. His strength was almost entirely increased by his Tao of medicine. His Tao heart was even inferior to some Emperor realm cultivators. When he encountered danger, the first thing he thought of was to flee. Looking at the escaping light of the medicine master, Chu Fengmian didn't stop him. Now that the medicine master had fled, Chu Fengmian could deal with Emperor Wu. Although the medicine master had little combat experience, he was still a powerful opponent. With the medicine master's escape, the pressure on Chu Fengmian was greatly reduced. Moreover, even if the medicine master escaped, he could only escape into Medicine King Valley. The monk could run, but the temple couldn't. After Chu Fengmian dealt with the Sage Monarch sect, he would attack Medicine King Valley. At that time, the medicine master would appear. With the medicine master's escape, now Chu Fengmian only had Emperor Wu to deal with. It seems that the helper you found has escaped. Chu Fengmian looked at Emperor Wu with a smile on his face. Looking at the medicine master's escape, the martial emperor's face was extremely ugly. In order to ask the medicine master to deal with Chu Fengmian, he had paid a great price. Many precious immortal herbs had been given to the medicine master. However, he didn't expect that the herb master would flee in defeat after just exchanging blows. His original plan of asking the herb master to help him deal with Chu Fengmian was completely ruined. Damn it! The martial emperor's expression was extremely ugly. He was well aware of Chu Fengmian's strength. The former sect master of the Tianjian sect, Gongyang Xian, had died at Chu Fengmian's hands. His strength was merely on par with Gongyang Xuan's. He asked the medicine master for help because he knew that it would be difficult for him to be a match for Chu Fengmian alone. But now, the herb master had escaped, and Wu Yinling was tied down by Alcade Star Emperor. He was the only one left. How could he fight against Chu Fengmian? However, Chu Fengmian didn't care so much. Without the herb master, Chu Fengmian could exert his full strength against Emperor Wu alone. Primogenitor Jianwang and Xianjing, the two innate divine beasts phantoms, roared behind Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian suddenly drew his sword. His sword contained the power of the two innate divine beasts. The dragon whale shatters the sea slashed out. Boom! An enormous power rolled down. Xianjing was the strongest among the innate divine beasts. Together with primogenitor Tianwang, the power of the two innate divine beasts erupted together. Even the sky was about to be torn apart. Emperor Wu also erupted with power. He met the attack head-on with his martial arts. However, at the moment of collision, he felt that his body was about to be shattered. These two forces were far from being on the same level. His body had reached an incomparably heaven-defying level. It was even comparable to the first and second immortal true bodies. But now, countless cracks appeared on his glass-like body. It was extremely difficult for him to resist the sword. Emperor Wu stared at Chu Fengmian with determination in his eyes. Suddenly, he ignited his blood essence. In an instant, almost 1/3 of Emperor Wu's blood essence was ignited. His martial arts and all his power were condensed on his fist. The power of this punch was even close to the level of martial arts origin. Suddenly, he threw out a punch. True force destroys the world. It was the supreme martial arts technique of the Sage Monarch sect. It was rumored that once one mastered it and ignited his blood essence, he could step into the origin of martial arts. The power of this punch was enough to destroy the world. Emperor Wu didn't hesitate to ignite his blood essence to display the strongest punch of the Sage Monarch sect. The strongest fist technique of the Sage Monarch sect. It is said that except for the previous generations of patriarchs, no one has ever succeeded in cultivating it. Emperor Wu ignited his blood essence to display this punch. Many martial artists and Fey gods nearby had heard of this punch. The power of this punch was enough to destroy the world. It was the strongest fist technique of the Sage Monarch sect. When they felt the power of the martial emperor's fist wind, they were all astonished. It was as if the moment this fist landed, everyone would be killed on the spot. True force destroys the world? I didn't expect you to have successfully cultivated this punch. Unfortunately, it's only a prototype. It's no big deal. Chu Fengmian saw Emperor Wu display this punch. True force destroys the world. His face was extremely calm. He only threw out 2 swords at the same time. 3 suns blazing sword. 4 directions hurricane sword. 6 directions mysterious water sword. The 3 swords of the first sword technique that Chu Fengmian had comprehended suddenly slashed out. The moment Chu Fengmian displayed these 3 swords, he added all the power of the ancient sword technique to these 3 swords. Vaguely, these 3 swords displayed by Chu Fengmian were even more mysterious than those recorded in the first sword technique. Chu Fengmian had touched the threshold of the origin of sword technique. His sword technique was even above that of the former first sword emperor. The first sword technique that he displayed was even more mysterious than that of the first sword emperor. Although Chu Fengmian's power was not at the level of the first sword emperor, Emperor Wu was only an expert at the peak of the immortal king realm. His power was on par with Chu Fengmian's. When it came to a battle of equal power, Chu Fengmian had never been afraid. The 3 swords were displayed together. The power of the swords swept across everything in the surroundings and collided with the punch of true force destroys the world. Emperor Wu's true force destroys the world contained the power to destroy the world. Just like that, Chu Fengmian's punch exploded with a loud bang. At the same time, Emperor Wu's body, which had a glass-like appearance, began to shatter. Under the blade of Chu Fengmian's sword, it was completely shattered. The body of the martial monarch suffered a heavy blow in mid-air, causing it to pause for a brief moment, before falling from the sky. Chapter 23-23. Defeated. Emperor Wu has also been defeated. Even Emperor Wu has been defeated. Who else can stop this man? It seems that the Sage Monarch sect will follow in the footsteps of the Tianjin sect. Seeing the martial emperor's body fall from the sky, many cultivators and beast deities couldn't help but discuss among themselves. Below them, the void jade city was completely silent. Seeing Emperor Wu fall from the sky, the martial artists of the Sage Monarch sect were all stunned for a moment. Their eyes were filled with incomparable shock. It was as if they could not believe that the patriarch, Emperor Wu, who was almost invincible in their eyes, could not withstand a single blow from Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian defeated him so easily. Chu Fengmian's figure also slowly descended from the sky. He came to the side of Emperor Wu, and the sword in his hand slowly fell. Bam! Blood splattered everywhere. Emperor Wu's body was shattered by Chu Fengmian's sword. Immediately, Emperor Wu's essence blood was completely devoured by the devouring heaven power and poured into Chu Fengmian's body. The old sect master of the Sage Monarch sect, the invincible expert of his generation, Emperor Wu, had fallen just like that. Seeing Emperor Wu's death, many people were shocked. Even the experts of the 9 regions felt a sense of desolation. Emperor Wu's reputation was well known among the experts of the 9 regions. Many of the experts of the 9 regions had even embarked on the path of becoming an expert because of their reverence for Emperor Wu. Seeing Emperor Wu die at the hands of Chu Fengmian, many people felt that this was the end of an era. In Suyu City, the Sage Monarch sect disciples were extremely pale when they saw Emperor Wu fall. "Run!" No one knew who was the first to shout. In Suyu City, countless Sage Monarch sect disciples were frantically running out of the city. With Emperor Wu dead, there was no one left in the Sage Monarch sect who could stand against Chu Fengmian. Even the immortal marquises, immortal kings, and former elders of the Sage Monarch sect didn't hesitate to flee. Trying to escape? Looking at the fleeing lights, Chu Fengmian's eyes were extremely cold. Chu Fengmian could not be bothered to kill the disciples of the Sage Monarch sect. However, the elders of the Sage Monarch sect had participated in the siege of the Sword Path sect. Their hands were stained with the blood of the Sword Dao Gate's disciples. None of these people could escape today. Life seal. Suppress. Chu Fengmian waved his hand and a seal appeared in his palm. It was the Life Grand Seal. The common life seal flew out and instantly grew to the size of a mountain. Under the pressure of the common life seal, the surrounding space was completely suppressed by the power of the common life seal. The elders and grand elders of the Sage Monarch sect were all suppressed by the Life Grand Seal. There were no exceptions. They were all sealed by the Life Grand Seal. The Life Grand Seal was an upper-grade immortal weapon. Previously, Chu Fengmian's strength wasn't enough, so he could only use a part of its power. But now, Chu Fengmian's strength was completely different from before. Under the support of the Mortal Emperor Art, the Mortal Life Seal was activated and sealed the space. Even if it was a peak immortal king, it would be hard for them to escape. Let me go. From now on, I'm willing to leave the Sage Monarch sect and have nothing to do with it. Don't kill me. I'm willing to serve you. I'm willing to join the Sword Path sect. Many of the elders of the Sage Monarch sect who were sealed by the Life Grand Seal shouted loudly. Many of them even knelt on the ground and begged for mercy. Begging for mercy? Chu Fengmian's face was extremely cold. Their pleas didn't affect Chu Fengmian's expression at all. Now, these people were begging for mercy. They wanted Chu Fengmian to spare their lives. But 10,000 years ago, when they besieged the Sword Path sect, they didn't let the disciples of the Sword Path sect go. Almost all the disciples of the Sword Dao sect had fallen. Even if they were to escape, they would have to hide their identities completely to escape the calamity. 10,000 years ago, they didn't show any mercy. Now, how could Chu Fengmian let them go? Die. Chu Fengmian's face was cold. He slowly raised the sword in his hand and suddenly slashed it out. In the space of the Life Grand Seal, all the elders of the Sage Monarch sect were killed without exception. Their blood essence was devoured by the sky-devouring secret skill and turned into pure immortal power that poured into Chu Fengmian's body. The Sage Monarch sect is finished. Seeing this scene, a martial artist whispered. Just like the Tianjian sect, the experts of the Sage Monarch sect were all killed by Chu Fengmian. Even if Chu Fengmian didn't kill all the disciples of the Sage Monarch sect. But there were only some disciples who hadn't even reached the celestial realm left. It was meaningless. After losing the experts in the sect, they could only join the 7 sections. In the future, there would be no more Tianjian sect. While everyone was still sighing with emotion. Ah! Suddenly, a scream was heard. Only then did everyone notice that on the other side, Wu Yinling had also died under the sword of Alcade Star Emperor. Everyone's attention was on Chu Fengmian and Emperor Wu. The fight between Alcade Star Emperor and Wu Yinling, two peak immortal kings, was forgotten by many people. But then, a scream was heard. Wu Yingling's body was pierced through by countless sword lights. Her blood essence was stripped out and devoured by the heaven-devouring secret technique. She was deader than dead. Although Wu Yingling, like all Cade Star Emperor, was at the peak of the immortal king realm, what she cultivated was the way of escape. She was good at sneak attacks, but not good at head-on combat. Therefore, although they were both peak immortal kings, Wu Yingling was still killed by the sword of all Cade Star Emperor. Moreover, Wu Yingling's way of escape was completely useless under the watchful eyes of the ancient Desolation White Wolf. She tried to escape several times, but she was stopped by the ancient Desolation White Wolf. In the end, Wu Yingling was killed by all Cade Star Emperor. Her blood essence was also devoured by Chu Fengmian's sky-devouring power. With Wu Yingling's death, the Sage Monarch sect was completely destroyed. Among the 7 sects, first the Tianjian sect, then the Sage Monarch sect, had been destroyed by Chu Fengmian. In the beginning, when Chu Fengmian planned to attack the Tianjian sect, countless people thought that Chu Fengmian was daydreaming. But now, not only the Tianjian sect, but even the Sage Monarch sect was destroyed by Chu Fengmian. Below, Suyu City was no longer as prosperous as before. It was as silent as a dead city. All the disciples of the Sage Monarch sect had fled, leaving only this empty city. Chapter 23-24. As soon as Chu Fengmian entered the Void Jade City, he immediately released his spiritual consciousness and shrouded the entire city. Immediately, Chu Fengmian had a panoramic view of the entire Void Jade City. Every treasury was instantly discovered by Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian's figure flickered as he arrived in front of each treasury. Using the sky-devouring secret technique, he easily unlocked all the restrictions in each treasury. All the treasures were swept clean by Chu Fengmian. Immortal stones, immortal elixirs, sacred elixirs, immortal weapons, and so on were all stored in Chu Fengmian's empty ring. Among them, Chu Fengmian saw some body-refining path sacred elixirs and immortal elixirs, which he directly swallowed. Although Chu Fengmian's immortal true body had reached the 4th level, it was still far from the limit. There was still room for improvement. These body-refining elixirs had the effect of improving Chu Fengmian's immortal true body. The Sage Monarch sect was the #1 body-refining sect in the 9 regions. There were many body-refining path elixirs in this treasury. Chu Fengmian collected several hundred ancient sacred elixirs and a dozen immortal elixirs. These ancient sacred elixirs and immortal elixirs were directly swallowed by Chu Fengmian, using their medicinal efficacy to refine Chu Fengmian's immortal true body. If it were any other body-tempering cultivator, or even a martial emperor, swallowing such a huge amount of medicinal energy in one go, their body would explode and their body would be destroyed. However, Chu Fengmian didn't care at all. His current physical body was already extremely tyrannical. Emperor Wu's body was at most equivalent to the 2nd level of the immortal true body. Now, Chu Fengmian's immortal true body had reached the 4th level. In terms of body, even an immortal monarch or a celestial saint who had stepped into the heavenly realm couldn't reach Chu Fengmian's level. The medicinal efficacy of these elixirs poured into Chu Fengmian's body, but was immediately suppressed by the 129,600 immortal crystals in Chu Fengmian's body. They couldn't harm Chu Fengmian at all. Instead, the medicinal efficacy was devoured by the 129,600 immortal crystals. Every immortal crystal in Chu Fengmian's body was repeatedly refined by the medicinal efficacy, and they were shining brighter and brighter. Chu Fengmian sensed that if this continued, his immortal true body could advance to the 5th level. Every time his immortal true body was upgraded, it brought unparalleled benefits to Chu Fengmian. When Chu Fengmian's immortal true body reached the 3rd level, it gave him an extremely powerful immortal secret technique. When his immortal body reached the 4th level, Chu Fengmian gained the ability to condense inscriptions. He was now a half-step celestial being and could kill peak immortal kings with the power of condensing inscriptions. Previously, when Chu Fengmian fought with enemies, he was at a disadvantage because of his strength. The difference in strength brought about by the difference in realm required Chu Fengmian to double his swordsmanship to make up for it. But when his immortal true body reached the 4th level and condensed inscriptions, Chu Fengmian's strength increased rapidly. Now, his strength was no less than that of peak immortal kings. This was the key reason why Chu Fengmian's strength increased so rapidly. Coupled with Chu Fengmian's swordsmanship and opportunities, he could kill peak immortal kings so easily. Chu Fengmian was also looking forward to the benefits that the 5th level of his immortal true body would bring him. However, the medicinal efficacy of these dozen immortal elixirs and hundreds of ancient sacred elixirs was quickly devoured by the 129,600 immortal crystals. Although there were some changes in the 129,600 immortal crystals, they were still some distance away from the next level, which made Chu Fengmian a little disappointed. However, Chu Fengmian also knew that every level up of his immortal true body would bring such heaven-defying benefits. If it was really so easy to level up, perhaps everyone in the world would have succeeded in cultivating the immortal true body. Moreover, even in the ancient books of the 9 regions, there was rarely any mention of the mysteries of the immortal true body. Obviously, there were very few experts who had cultivated to the 3rd or 4th level of the immortal true body. That was why there were very few records even in the ancient books. The resources that Chu Fengmian had now reached an astronomical figure. The Tianjian sect and the Sage Monarch sect were sects with tens of thousands of years of heritage. The amount of resources they had accumulated in their treasure vaults was unimaginably huge. Chu Fengmian could now devour all the elixirs in the Sage Monarch sect that were beneficial to his immortal true body, but they still could not level up his immortal true body. From this point, it could be seen how difficult it was for the immortal true body to level up. Chu Fengmian was not anxious that he could not level up for the time being. He still had time now. It had been less than 15 minutes since he destroyed the Sage Monarch sect. As Chu Fengmian's strength increased, the time it took for him to attack a sect also increased. There was still 15 minutes left, enough for Chu Fengmian to attack the next sect. Let's go to the Valley of the Medicine Masters. After Chu Fengmian collected all the treasures in the Sage Monarch sect, he immediately tore through space and headed in the direction of the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Among the 7 major sects, the richest one was not the Tianjian sect or the Ancient Desolate sect, but the sect of the Medicine Masters. The Medicine Masters of the Medicine Masters reigned supreme in the 9 regions. Many experts among the 7 major sects would even be willing to pay a huge price for the Medicine Masters to refine elixirs for them. Moreover, among the 7 major sects of the 9 regions, the sect of the Medicine Masters was the oldest one. It had existed for almost 100,000 years. Ever since the Medicine Masters became famous, the sect of the Medicine Masters had been famous in the 9 regions. Chu Fengmian could not even begin to imagine the amount of resources they had accumulated. To Chu Fengmian, increasing his strength was the most important thing. The experts of the Ancient Desolate sect, the 6 demonic sects, the Ancient Moon Valley, and Tianshu Hall had yet to show themselves. They were waiting for the Ancient White Wolf to dissipate. The Ancient White Wolf could only maintain it for another 15 minutes at most. In this last 15 minutes, Chu Fengmian had to increase his strength once more. After obtaining a large number of elixirs from the Sage Monarch sect, Chu Fengmian had also touched the threshold of the immortal true body's 5th level. As long as he obtained a large number of elixirs, Chu Fengmian would have a chance to raise his immortal true body to the 5th level. When that time came, without the help of the Ancient White Wolf, Chu Fengmian would not be afraid of being surrounded by the other major sections. Chapter 23-25. The reason why Chu Fengmian's attack was so smooth was that, in addition to the help of Alcade Star Emperor, Chu Fengmian's growth and strength was mainly due to the primordial White Wolf's incarnation, which deterred the experts of the other sections. No one was willing to risk their lives against the incarnation of a jade talisman. However, there was only one chance. In 15 minutes, Chu Fengmian would have to face the joint attack of the desolate ancient sect, the 6 demonic sects, Tianshu Hall, and the ancient Moon Valley. It was even possible that the extraterrestrial forces would intervene and besiege Chu Fengmian. Everyone wanted Chu Fengmian's opportunity. In the face of enough benefits, even those who had no enmity with Chu Fengmian would raise their butcher's knife and become his enemy. The most important thing was to improve his strength. Chu Fengmian chose to attack the Tianjian sect first because of the Tianjian sect's sword Dao totem. Chu Fengmian chose the Sage Monarch sect second because Wu Yinling was seriously injured and because Wu Yinling was a body-refining sect. She would definitely have a large number of body-refining elixirs. These elixirs would also bring Chu Fengmian a lot of benefits. Now, Chu Fengmian's third target was the Medicine King Valley. Countless martial artists and Yao gods looked in the direction that Chu Fengmian had taken to, and their eyes were filled with shock. He's going to attack the Medicine King Valley? Attacking the Medicine King Valley? He's going to turn the world upside down. Crazy, this is crazy. Even the experts of the other sects won't sit by and do nothing. Some warriors were stunned for a moment. Chu Fengmian's action was simply crazy to the extreme. The Medicine King Valley was a taboo in the 9 domains. It could be said that there were sects that had wanted to attack the Tianjian sect, the Sage Monarch sect, and the Desolate Ancient sect. However, no sect had ever dared to attack the Medicine King Valley. Due to the uniqueness of the Medicine King Valley, it was the largest medicine sect in the 9 domains. It could be said that the cultivators of the various forces who wanted to refine elixirs had all invited the cultivators of the Valley of the Medicine Masters to refine elixirs for them. As such, they naturally owed the Valley of the Medicine Masters a favor. Whoever dared to attack the Valley of the Medicine Masters would not only be going against the 7 major sects, but also the entire 9 zones. Once the Valley of the Medicine Masters was in danger, the other forces of the 9 zones would not sit idly by. Therefore, although the wealth of the Valley of the Medicine Masters was well known, in reality, no one had ever dared to attack the Valley of the Medicine Masters or even entertain such thoughts. And the direction that Chu Fengmian left in was clearly the direction of the Valley of the Medicine Masters. This person is completely insane. There were also some warriors who couldn't understand Chu Fengmian's crazy behavior and couldn't help but ask. The ancient White Wolf's incarnation won't last much longer. The experts of the Desolate Ancient Sect, Ancient Moon Valley, Divine Pivot Hall and the 6 demonic sects are unwilling to take action because they are wary of the ancient White Wolf's incarnation. But once the ancient White Wolf's incarnation disappears, this person will have no one to rely on. No matter how strong he is, he won't be able to withstand a single blow from the 7 major sects. This person is planning to plunder as many resources as he can before the ancient White Wolf's incarnation completely disappears to increase his strength so that he will have the capital to contend with the 7 major sects in the future. An elder spoke slowly. He had also guessed Chu Fengmian's plan. But the Valley of the Medicine Masters is not so easy to deal with. This person seems to have boundless glory, but in reality, he is standing in danger. Attacking the Valley of the Medicine Masters is a huge gamble. Once he fails, what awaits him is eternal damnation. Let's go to the Valley of the Medicine Masters. There were also warriors and demon immortals who broke through the air and tore the space apart, opening up space passageways and flying in the direction of the Valley of the Medicine Masters. In the void, Chu Fengmian, the Alcade Star Emperor, and the ancient White Wolf. The 3 figures traversed the void, crossing thousands of miles in a single step. Senior brother, are you really going to attack the Valley of the Medicine Masters? The Alcade Star Emperor, who was beside Chu Fengmian, looked at Chu Fengmian with a worried expression. Attacking the Valley of the Medicine Masters is not as simple as attacking the Tianjian sect or the Sage Monarch sect. Among the experts of the 9 regions, although the 7 major sects are the most powerful, there are still many hidden experts. With the Valley of the Medicine Masters relationship, there are many people who are willing to take action. I'm afraid it will be difficult to succeed. The Valley of the Medicine Masters may be the weakest among the 7 major sects on the surface. But in reality, when the Valley of the Medicine Masters was in danger, it would be stronger than any of the other sects. Its connections and favors were not limited to the 9 regions. Even many extraterritorial stars, including the experts of the 3 major sacred regions, owed the Valley of the Medicine Masters a favor. If Chu Fengmian wanted to attack the Valley of the Medicine Masters, he would have to face a colossus. Even the Alcade Star Emperor could not help but be a little worried. "I have my own plans," Chu Fengmian said indifferently. He naturally had everything considered before attacking the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Seeing Chu Fengmian's confident attitude, the Alcade Star Emperor did not say anything. She was already used to trusting Chu Fengmian. The ancient white wolf stood to the side and did not make a sound. Its existence was to protect Chu Fengmian. As for everything else, it had nothing to do with it. In a few breaths of time, the spatial tunnel had reached the end. Chu Fengmian stepped out, and in front of him was a huge valley. This valley was surrounded by clouds and mist, and there were towering trees standing in the middle. The moment he approached the valley, he could smell a medicinal fragrance. This medicinal fragrance was extremely beneficial to mortals. Mortals near the Valley of the Medicine Masters could easily live up to 150 or 160 years and be immune to all diseases. This was the Valley of the Medicine Masters. The Medicine King's Valley made its living through the Tao of medicine, and it had always concocted medicine for the experts of the 9 realms. Naturally, it was like the Heavenly Sword sect, which was hidden in a small world and built in a valley in the 9 realms. And with the Valley of the Medicine Masters' identity, they never thought that anyone would be so bold as to attack the Valley of the Medicine Masters. But today, these 100,000 years of peace had been devoured. It was broken. Just above the sky, a spatial crack suddenly tore open, and from it, 3 figures slowly walked out. These 3 figures were Chu Fengmian, the Alcade Star Emperor, and the ancient white wolf. Below, the Valley of the Medicine Masters was already waiting for the attack. After Chu Fengmian attacked the Tianjian sect and the Sage Monarch sect, the other forces were all in danger. Now, they were already prepared, and the Valley of the Medicine Masters was no exception. A huge array shrouded the valley. At a glance, this array was thousands of miles wide and covered the entire sky. This array was mysterious and much more powerful than the arrays of the Tianjian sect and the Sage Monarch sect. It could be said that except for the arrays seen in the ruins of the Upper Sword sect, this array of the Valley of the Medicine Masters was the most powerful array Chu Fengmian had ever seen. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.